Chapter 952. Suddenly, a bell rang in a temple not far away from the street. Ning Ke was folding his umbrella. He was tortured by the bell in Xiankong Temple. Hearing the bell again, he was shocked and grabbed Sang Sang's hand. Sang Sang looked at him with no emotion in her eyes. Then Ning Ke remembered that he had left Xiankong Temple. He let go of her hand in embarrassment and put his hand behind his back like she did. The bell in Chaoyang City was ringing louder and louder, and all the temples were ringing. Ning Ke could clearly hear that the loudest bell came from the north of the city, which should be the ancient bell in White Tower Temple. Some pedestrians were eating starched jelly, some were eating pilaf with banana leaves, and some were watching monkey shows. Hearing the bell, they put down what they were doing and walked to the nearest temple. Some people could not leave, so they knelt on the street and kept praying with their palms put together. The monkey show man also knelt on the ground in fear and trepidation. He even pressed the naughty monkey to the ground and kowtowed. Only Ning Ke and Sang Sang were left standing. Although the devout followers of the Buddhism sect did not look at them with hostility, they could not help but feel puzzled. The changes brought about by the bell were actually very cute, like some kind of flash mob that Ning Ke had seen in that world. The little monkey that was gently pressed by its owner kept rolling its eyes, which was also very cute. But Ning Ke suddenly felt a little disgusted because he had seen the tragic world under the Xiankong Temple. Sang Sang hated these scenes even more. She gently flicked her sleeves. With a light brush, flowers bloomed on the green sleeves. A gust of wind rose on the street, blowing away the starched jelly stall and blowing away the rice grains on the banana leaves. Many people were blinded by the wind. The man who was playing the monkey tried to rub his eyes, but he forgot to grab the rope. The little monkey, who had regained its freedom, ran out immediately. It didn't run too far away. It just looked for the fragrant and spicy rice grains among the flying banana leaves and ate happily. The bell of the temple on the street was also blown by the gust of wind, and the rhythm of the bell became messy. The wind did not stop and went up to the sky, messing up the clouds over Chaoyang City. Sang Sang was somewhat satisfied and continued to walk forward with her hands behind her back. Looking at her back, Ning Ke fell silent. When she was in the Westhill Divine Palace, she did not need to do anything. She did not even have to think about it. She only needed to feel a little uneasy and stars would appear and disappear in her eyes. Countless clouds would appear from thousands of miles away and thunder and lightning would appear on the top of Peach Mountain. However, after leaving the West Hill, especially after entering the depths of the wilderness, she began to flick her sleeves when she was in a fight or when she was angry. Sang Sang's divine might was still far beyond the scope of human imagination, but compared to the once omnipotent Sang Sang, she had indeed become much weaker. Ning Ke was a little uneasy, but he could not say anything. The reason why she was getting weaker was because the headmaster had left the power of the human world in her body. It was because of the long and happy journey 2 years ago, but now that he thought about it, it was such a dangerous journey. More importantly, it was because he took her to walk in the human world and did not let her go back. The streets were filled with smoke and dust blown by the wind. The smoke and dust were full of the smell of spices, and it was a little choking. Perhaps it was because the people here were used to it since they were young, but there was no sound of coughing. Walking in the smoke and dust was also walking on the old road. Ning Ke and Sang Sang had lived in this city for a long time. He once fled here with her on his back. Many streets and alleys were left with his footprints and blood stains of the people he killed. However, after nearly 3 years, those bloodstains had long disappeared. It seemed incredible to enter the chessboard on the cliff plateau of Xiankong Temple and come out in Chaoyang City. In fact, there was only one possibility. Just like in Lang Temple, there was also a space passage between Xiankong Temple and Chaoyang City, and this chessboard was the key to open this space passage. Back then, Ning Ke and Sang Sang came directly from Lang Temple in the southeast to Xiankong Temple in the depths of the western wilderness. Today, they came directly from Xiankong Temple to Chaoyang City. At this time, the two of them were walking in Chaoyang City. It seemed that they were naturally looking for the traces of Buddha. However, both Sang Sang and Ning Ke were very clear that Buddha could not be in this city. In the human world, it was impossible to hide from Hao Tian's eyes. Ning Ke did not point this out, nor did Sang Sang. It seemed that the two of them were really looking for Buddha. Since they were looking for him, it would naturally take time. Let's find a place to stay first, and then slowly look for him, he said. Sang Sang did not speak. Her silence meant that she agreed. If she wanted to object, she would speak directly or cut Ning Ke into pieces to show her attitude. In a noisy block in the north of the city, there was a very quiet and even deathly courtyard. It was the small courtyard that the two of them used to live in. Several years had passed, but no one had come to visit it. Pushing open the courtyard door, the small courtyard was still so quiet. The black cloth that Ning Ke used to cover the window was still hanging, but it was covered with a lot of dust. The putty that was smeared on the cracks of the woodshed window had already cracked and peeled off. Sang Sang looked at the shabby courtyard. A wet wind came from the back of the courtyard and instantly carried away all the dust in the house. The small courtyard suddenly became very clean. She pushed open the door of the woodshed. After thinking for a while, she did not go in. Instead, she turned into the bedroom and lay on the bed. Now she was no longer the daughter of Yama and naturally did not need to hide from anyone. Cook more vegetables for dinner, she said. Ning Ke nodded and walked to the courtyard to prepare firewood for cooking. Looking at the lonely small tree, he was a little reluctant to do it. Where was the black crow on the branch? The stream behind the courtyard was still there, and there was still a tree by the stream. He chopped off enough wood with his palm and was about to leave when he suddenly saw a deep fist mark on a tree. Back then, he had to take care of Sang Sang, who was seriously ill and always be on guard against the pursuit of the Buddhism and Taoism sects. He was always anxious and nervous. When he was about to give up, he went to the stream and wanted to vent his anger by punching the tree. However, he did not expect that his fist was so hard that it almost broke the tree. Looking at the fist mark on the tree, Ning Ke laughed. He was very happy that the tree was not broken, and he was also very happy that his fist mark was still there, because these were his most cherished memories. Just like the tree in the courtyard and the black crow that had once landed on it. Piling the wood in the corner of the courtyard, he pushed open the bedroom door and walked to the bed. Looking at Sang Sang, who was sleeping soundly, he asked, "What do you want to eat?" "I'm not familiar with the produce of the Yueluan kingdom." Sang Sang opened her eyes, which were bright and clear, without any tiredness or sleepiness after waking up. Ning Ke had never understood what sleep meant to her. She thought for a while and said, "I'll go shopping with you." The two went to the market and bought a lot of vegetables. Then they went to the grocery store to buy rice, oil, salt, vinegar, pots and pans. They also bought a caddy of streaky pork and went home to make a sumptuous dinner. It was Ning Ke's job to carry the vegetables, cook and wash the dishes. During this process, Sang Sang just followed him with her hands behind her back. Sometimes she looked at him, and sometimes she looked at the sky. Ning Ke squatted in front of the basin and washed the dishes. He felt that this work was even harder than when he killed the horse gang. After a while, he felt sore all over. Looking at Sang Sang at the door with her hands behind her back, he could not help but get annoyed. "I can't beat you now, so I'll just do more housework." "It's fine if you don't want to help." Hao Tian, of course, is honorable. How can he be involved in such matters? "It's fine if you just watch from the side, but can I trouble you with one thing? Can you not put your hands behind your back?" He complained, "You're like a leader inspecting your work. It hurts my enthusiasm." Sang Sang ignored him and walked into the room. She looked around with her hands behind her back and said, "I want tea." God said let there be light, so there was light in the world. Sang Sang was the god of this world. If she said tea, there would be tea. She could make countless kinds of good tea, but for some reason, she wanted Ning Ke to buy them. Ning Ke was indeed a little tired, but also happy. Because he knew that Sang Sang's behavior proved that she had a deeper connection with the human world. She was becoming more and more like a human. That night, he knocked on the door of the largest tea house in Chaoyang City and bought 74 kinds of the most famous tea from each country with 2 taels of silver. At the same time, he packed several sets of expensive tea sets. After drinking tea for 3 days, Sang Sang suddenly said, "I want to play chess." So Ning Ke searched everywhere for the best chess sets. But this time, it was more troublesome to satisfy Sang Sang's request, because chess always needed an opponent. "You're too weak." Sang Sang looked at the white pieces on the chessboard and said to him. As a man, what he hated most was losing to his woman in chess or cards. Ning Ke was already in a bad mood at this time. Hearing this, he was even more annoyed. We lowly human beings are no match for the almighty Haotian. This was Sang Sang's most common evaluation of human beings. But it sounded bitter coming from his mouth. Sang Sang's expression didn't change. She said, "Human beings are indeed lowly, but some people are relatively better. Chen Pipi is much better than you in this aspect." As a man, what he really hated most was to be judged by his own woman as inferior to another man, even if that man was a good brother who had gone through thick and thin with him. Ning Ke said angrily, "I can't get him from Linkong City." Sang Sang said, "Then you have to think of another way." The next day, the 3 most famous chess players in Chaoyang City were invited to the small courtyard by Ning Quebec. Or rather, kidnapping was more appropriate. In addition to drinking tea, playing chess, and listening to plays, Ning Ke and Sang Sang would sometimes go to Chaoyang City to see the White Tower and walk by the lake. She still habitually put her hands behind her back. Dozens of days passed peacefully like this. They seemed to be looking for something in Chaoyang City, but in fact, they were looking for nothing. They didn't ask where to go or what to do. They only asked what to eat the next day. One night, Ning Ke peeled a mangosteen and put the white kernel in front of Sang Sang's face. He laughed and said, "Doesn't this look like a butt?" Sang Sang rarely showed any expression on her face. He had always been a little unwilling. This time, he also failed. Sang Sang looked at him quietly for a long time. Suddenly, she said, "Are we greedy?" Ning Ke was silent for a moment. He put the mangosteen in his hand into her mouth. Then he walked to the courtyard and played a set of bladesmanship. He fetched some water from the stream and took a bath. He said, "I'm going to sleep." Sang Sang sat by the table and looked at the tree outside the window. She didn't say anything. She used to want to return to Haotian's divine kingdom because it was her mission. As long as she got rid of Buddha and killed Ning Ke, she could go back. But she and Ning Ke were born together. If Ning Ke died, she would die too. It would be Haotian who returned to the divine kingdom. She would no longer have the name Sang Sang. She would no longer be herself. She wanted to continue being herself. She wanted to continue having the name Sang Sang. What made her even angrier and more uneasy was that she actually wanted to continue living with him in the small courtyard like this. Green vegetables, fat meat, white rice, tea, and chess games were not a bad experience. So she didn't think about Buddha, the academy, Taoism, the divine kingdom, or the human world. As long as these days continued, she would continue to be herself, and she would continue to have him by her side. Yes, she was really greedy. Ning Ke once asked outside Chang, "And how can there be a perfect way in the world?" "I won't let Chang and down or let you down." In fact, he knew that there was no such perfect way in the world. He was not afraid of death. He could actually threaten Sang Sang to go to Chang and with suicide, and then the academy would use the God-stunning array to suppress her. Neither the Buddhism sect nor Taoism sect could do anything about it. But he was reluctant. So he took her to live in this small courtyard in Chaoyang City, ignoring what was happening in the human world. He didn't think about the academy or Buddha. He didn't think about anything. Yes, he was also very greedy. He was greedy for a moment of pleasure. After that night's conversation, Ning Ke and Sang Sang never talked about this again. The ordinary life in the human world went on peacefully. They had been in Chaoyang City for half a year, and the outside world had nothing to do with them. Chaoyang City was very lively after the beginning of spring. There were theaters everywhere. One evening, Ning Ke and Sang Sang returned from the theater. They bought half a pound of pig head meat on the street and had a simple dinner. Looking at the few pieces of pig head meat left in the bowl, Sang Sang suddenly said, "There's too little food." Ning Ke thought that no one would have the patience to cook a table full of food every day. He naturally changed the topic, "Cook something delicious tomorrow. By the way, did you like the play today?" Sang Sang stood up and walked out of the courtyard without any expression on her face. Ning Ke was slightly startled. He put the bowl and chopsticks into the basin, wiped the water on his hands, and chased after her. Standing in the woods by the stream, she looked at the sky in silence with her hands behind her back. Ning Ke looked at the fist mark on the tree and found that it had become much fainter because of the regeneration of the bark in less than half a year. Naturally, it also looked much fainter. His mood became indifferent. Was he going to leave after all? Sang Sang said, "Being together doesn't mean being together." Ning Ke understood what she meant. After a moment of silence, he said, "Being together is because we should be together. It's not that I want to keep you in the human world in this way." Sang Sang did not speak for a long time. Ning Ke said, "You know what I'm thinking." Sang Sang said, "Yes, I know what you're thinking. But it's still greed." Ning Ke looked at the side of her face and said, "Greed is not a sin." Sang Sang looked at the sky and said, "It's wrong." "What is greed?" "Love is greed. Because you like it, you will be greedy. Even a moment of greed in the human world is better than countless divine kingdoms. But a moment is too short after all. For 1,000 words, I have already written 10,000 today. I will continue to write. My leader saw that I wrote it seriously, so she did not let me accompany her to walk the dog. I like this chapter, but not the next one. I will go to eat now. The next chapter will definitely be late. Don't worry. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 953. Ning Ke looked at the fist print on the tree and asked, "What's wrong?" Sang Sang did not say anything. She walked back to the small courtyard with her hands behind her back, and he followed her. It was early spring and the tree in the courtyard did not have many leaves. She walked to the tree and looked at the trembling branches. She said, "Since it's not true, then let me go." Since Ning Ke thought that they were just living together, and it was not a way for him to keep her in the human world, then he should not stop her when she wanted to leave. "You can leave at any time," Ning Ke said behind her. Sang Sang looked at the branches. Amidst the flapping of its fan, a black crow landed where she was looking. She said, "If I really want to leave, you will kill yourself." Ning Ke did not say anything. Sang Sang turned around and looked at him. She asked, "Do you want me to die so badly?" This was the 6th time she said this to Ning Ke, or thought of it in her heart. "I just don't want you to go." Ning Ke did not avoid her eyes and said, "Even if you leave, where can you go? You have been to the human world, how can you sit in the cold divine kingdom for a long time?" Sang Sang said, "I should be there." Ning Ke said, "Where is that?" "You often say that this is the world of Haotian, and the divine kingdom must be in this world. Then what is the difference between the divine kingdom and the human world?" Sang Sang said, "Now your teacher is there." Ning Ke said, "Why do you have to stop my teacher? Why do you have to stop us? Don't you want to know what is outside this world? This is my world. I am the rule of this world. My existence comes from the unique characteristics of this world. If you want to destroy the characteristics of this world, then I cannot exist." Sang Sang looked at his eyes and said calmly, "This is the most fundamental contradiction between me, your teacher and the academy. It cannot be solved. If you insist, you will kill me. Do you want me to die so badly? This was the 7th time. Ning Ke looked at her quietly and said, "Don't go back. Become a real person, and we will live together." Sang Sang said, "People will die." Ning Ke said, "Cultivation can lead to longevity. We will cultivate together." Sang Sang said, "I want to maintain the existence of this world." Ning Ke said, "I don't understand. There are obviously other ways to solve this problem. Why do you have to guard this old world? What are you guarding?" Sang Sang said, "I don't understand either. Why do you and some humans in history have to leave this world? What do you want to know?" Ning Ke said, "What we want to know is very simple. We want to know what's out there." Sang Sang said, "I don't want to know." All of her logical thinking, to be more precise, all of her life carried the objectivity of rules. If the human instinct was to yearn for freedom, then her instinct was to be self-contained and self-consistent. Ning Ke took a step forward and stood in front of her. The crow on the branch cawed coldly. He held her hand, looked into her eyes, and said, "Become human, then we will live together, cultivate together, buy groceries together, eat together, and do many things together." Sang Sang had never looked at herself in the mirror since she came to the human world. She was not very happy with the face she made according to the most mediocre human face and the tall body she made according to her own will. So at this moment, she felt strange and confused when she looked at the woman in Ning Ke's eyes. "Why do you want to do this? Even if it's for human beings, and of course, most importantly for me, please stay." In Sang Sang's eyes, the ordinary face in his eyes suddenly shattered into countless pieces of light and shadow, unable to gather together again, so her eyes returned to indifference. "No." She looked at Ning Ke and said calmly, "Countless years ago, human beings chose me and woke me up from the chaos. They wanted me to bring them eternal peace." Ning Ke didn't know what to say. He didn't understand why his words made her react so violently. He thought it was the choice of human beings that made her wake up, but after hearing her next words, he realized it was because of him. "Now I can understand that imagination and curiosity about the outside world are instinctive desires of human beings. But those people don't include you, because you are not from this world." Sang Sang looked at him and said, "You come from outside the world, so you know very well what the outside world is like. You have been telling me about that world since 20 years ago. I haven't forgotten it, and I can clearly see the picture of that world in your consciousness." Ning Ke felt his body gradually become cold. He said, "That world is very beautiful and full of vitality. There are countless real suns, and it is full of warmth." "You are lying." Sang Sang's voice was still so calm, without any extra emotion. But her words were like thunder exploding in the sky above Chaoyang City. Countless people were shocked and looked up at the sky. "Your world is full of danger. The burning sun may explode at any time, and it may go out at any time. Most of the places are as cold as the netherworld. Be it the weak ordinary people or the stronger cultivators, none of them can survive in that world." Ning Ke said, "The life of a star is hundreds of millions of years. How can it explode at any time? I admit that most of the places are cold, but that world is really big, and it can always find a suitable place." Sang Sang said, "Even hundreds of millions of years is just a very short time for life that needs eternal life. Not to mention that your world will eventually go to nirvana, and nothing will be left." Ning Ke was silent for a long time, and then said, "Or, there will be some memories left." Sang Sang's words left no room for warmth. "There is no temperature, and there is nothing. Nirvana is the end. There is no eternity, and that is the greatest horror." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "It's not like that. I admit that you are right. The outside world may really go to nirvana, but in the long years before that, life can walk to the edge of the world, or directly break the world, and find the way to a new world." Sang Sang said, "What if it can't be found?" Ning Ke didn't know why he was a little angry. He said in a low voice, "You have never lived in that world. How can you be sure that human beings can't find a new world? Because I am not a human being. I never deceive myself as a comfort. Sang Sang looked at him and said calmly, compared to my world, the outside world is more like the netherworld. What you want to do will make me think of you as the son of Yama. Ning Ke hadn't heard of the son of Yama for a long time. Many years ago, including some people in the Great Divine Priest of Light, had been guessing that he was the son of Yama. Later, the title fell on Long Qing for a short time, and finally Sang Sang took over the name. Now he naturally knew that there was no Yama, and Haotian was Yama. But at the same time, he had to admit that Sang Sang was right to some extent. The world he had lived in was so cold, so turbulent, and so dangerous compared to this world, just like the kingdom of Yama. He came here from that world, brought the information of that world here, and strengthened the belief of the academy in the headmaster of the academy. If the Haotian world was really broken and went to a wider universe, but was eventually destroyed, then his arrival would bring the shadow of Yama to this world. This speculation made him very cold, and he subconsciously became angry. He looked at Sang Sang and shouted, "You always want to win in everything, even in a discussion. You have never admitted defeat, not even once. Why?" Sang Sang looked at him quietly with a slightly pitiful expression. Her expression made him even angrier. He walked to the tree and slapped it heavily. The black crow on the branch looked down at him, but didn't fly away, nor did it make an unpleasant sound. "It's been so many years. Ever since you could speak, I've always listened to you. In other people's eyes, you're my little handmaiden who serves me every day. When I say go east, you don't dare to go west. When I say eat dry rice, you don't dare to boil the rice. But you should know very well what the real situation is. Before I say go east, you look to the east first. When I say eat dry rice, that's because you poured out the leftover porridge the night before." Ning Ke turned to look at her and shouted angrily. "In Min Mountain, I risked my life to catch a deer. You just looked at me, and I let it go. When you were 8 years old in the city of Wei, the fat aunt proposed marriage for you on behalf of her distant nephew. You were not happy, and I almost killed that boy that night. You said you wanted to go back to Chang'an, so I went back. You said you wanted to sell your calligraphy, so I wrote for sale. You said you wanted to rent the shop on Lin 14th Street, so I rented it. In the end, I almost sold my life to Chao Xiao Shu. For you, I slapped Long Qing's face swollen. Just because he used you to threaten me, I didn't care if I offended the Westhill Divine Palace or caused trouble for the Academy. I directly shot him into an idiot. Well, I was chased by Yi Hongyu like a dog. And this broken place." He pointed to the small courtyard, looked at her and said in a trembling voice, "Was it fun to turn yourself into the daughter of Yama? For me, it was really not fun at all. The whole world wanted to kill you, and I was the only one who carried you on my back. I was really scared at that time. I couldn't beat them, did you know that? But I still fought them, didn't I?" Sang Sang did not speak, but just looked at him quietly. "I have never disobeyed your opinion. I will do whatever you want, and I will not hurt you. There is no such possibility in my mind. It has been like this since the day I found you in Hebei province. I pity you, I love you, and I value you more than my own life." Ning Ke's voice gradually became lower, but his emotions became more agitated. He said, "Because I was also abandoned by the whole world at that time. At that time, only you were by my side. You survived because of me, and I survived because I had to support you. What is natal? This is natal." Sang Sang looked up at the sky, which was gradually being invaded by the darkness, and did not speak. The black crow perched on the branch slightly tilted its head to look at the two people in the courtyard, as if it wanted to figure out the current situation. "Youngest uncle was killed by you, but I was not born at that time, so I could ignore it. But I can no longer say that I have nothing to do with my teacher's death." Ning Ke's voice became a little hoarse, very low, and very tired, as if he would collapse at any time. She did not know whether it was because he had talked too much or because he was too emotional. At that time by the Sisui River, I could have stopped you, because you are my natal, but I didn't. I thought it was because I forgot, but later I found out that I didn't. It was just that I instinctively let myself forget it, because I was really afraid of your death. He looked up at the stars in the night sky and the moon that was about to appear. After a moment of silence, he continued, I have never told anyone about this. But in fact, everyone knows about it. Even the senior brothers and sisters in the academy know about it. But they have never mentioned it. For you, I can give up everything, I can be shameless, I can give up my life, not to mention loyalty, righteousness, honor, and morality. If it was in the past, I could kill everyone in the world for you. As long as you are alive, as long as you are well, I don't care what others think of me, how they talk about me, how they laugh at me, how they hate me, and how they are afraid of me. Ning Ke looked back at her and said with tears in his eyes, but, not this time. My senior brothers and sisters in the academy, and those people in Chang'an, they are very good to me, and also to you. If I let you go back, my teacher will die, the Tang Empire will be destroyed, and there will be no academy in the world. So I can't listen to you. The moon finally appeared in the night sky, just behind him, but it was not bright, because the moon waxed and waned. The moon tonight was so dim, as if it could be extinguished at any time. I will die, too. When Ning Ke spoke, Sang Sang had been silent until now. She looked at him and said calmly, if it weren't for the academy and you, I wouldn't have been forced into such a mess by those monks in the Xiankong temple. You should know that I am getting weaker day by day. If you don't let me go back to the divine kingdom, I will die one day. Don't talk about becoming a real human and then cultivating. I have said that I don't like to deceive myself. I am Haotian, how can I become a human? If I become a human, will I still be who I am now? How can you guarantee that I will be alive? The headmaster of the academy was the first person in the world of Haotian for tens of thousands of years. Haotian's coming to the human world was also something that had never happened in history. As for him, the guest from the outside world, he was even more special. No one knew the final ending of the story written by the three of them. Haotian didn't know, the headmaster didn't know, and Ning Ke didn't know either. So he couldn't answer this question. He could only walk to the door of the kitchen and turn back to ask her, shall I cook a bowl of noodles for you? Sang Sang looked at him quietly. There was no disappointment in her eyes, only indifference. I have no appetite. After saying this, she walked back to the bedroom and covered herself with the quilt. Like a child who was angry, she pulled the quilt up high to cover her face, as if it would make her feel better. After a while, Ning Ke walked into the bedroom, lifted the quilt and helped her up. She said, I don't want to eat noodles. Ning Ke said, warm your feet before you sleep. Sang Sang then saw a pot of hot water in front of the bed. Ning Ke squatted down and took off her shoes. He tested the water temperature and found that it was just right. He put her white feet in the water and carefully washed them, not even the gaps between her toes. It was a quiet night. Sang Sang didn't get up when she woke up in the morning. Instead, she continued to lie on the bed and look at the roof. A spider web was formed on the clean beam, and the spider waited quietly at the edge of the web. When an insect bumped into the web, it would crawl over and kill the food in the most enthusiastic way, and then greedily suck the delicious juice. We can't go on like this. We need to make a decision. She turned sideways and looked at Ning Ke's face. She said, if you don't let me go, I will kill everyone. Ning Ke rubbed his eyes and said, there is no rice left. Remind me to buy a bag of rice when you buy vegetables. They cooked a pot of porridge with the remaining rice in the rice jar. After they finished it, they went to the market. They went to the rice shop first. When Ning Ke was about to pay, he suddenly found that there was a head in the bag of rice. It was the head of the rice shop owner. Blood seeped out of the bag. As for the rice in the bag, it had long been dyed red. It looked like the blood rice of the kingdom of Qi, and it gave off a disgusting smell of blood. The shop assistants and the women who bought rice screamed at the scene and rushed out of the shop. However, they became dead before they could step over the threshold. Hao Tian had countless ways to kill a person. She could make a person die quietly, with a happy expression, as if he was still sleeping and in the sweetest dream. But obviously, Sang Sang did not choose this method. In order to make Ning Ke feel more direct and show her determination, she used a very bloody method. The rice shop was full of broken limbs. Ning Ke looked at her with a pale face. He wanted to say something, but he could not. He walked out of the rice shop and did not dare to buy vegetables again. He lowered his head and walked quickly between the stalls. No matter how those familiar vegetable sellers called him, he ignored them and even forgot that he was still carrying a bag of rice stained with blood. Sang Sang did not want to let him go. Although he did not do anything, as he moved, the vegetable stalls he passed turned into a pool of blood. Those vegetable sellers died miserably. Enough. Ning Ke stopped at the entrance of the market. The street in front of him was full of people. He did not dare to take another step forward. He could only turn around and shout at Sang Sang angrily. There was blood everywhere in the market. It had already reached the soles of his shoes. Sang Sang walked in the sea of blood without any emotion on her face. Looking at this scene, Ning Ke's body trembled. Then, he gradually calmed down. His pale face was full of exhaustion. He looked at Sang Sang and said, "It doesn't work on me." Sang Sang said, "I want to try. Besides, what if it was a Tang who died?" Ning Ke did not say anything. He began to feel nervous. Because she had already thought. Thought was anger. Anger was anger. And anger came from different places. 4 chapters, 15,000 words completed. I wish everyone a happy weekend. I am a little tired from writing, but I am satisfied with the content, so I am in a good mood. Please vote for me. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 954. Anger came from different perspectives, different names, and different nature of life. Tofu pudding was salty or sweet, zongzi was meat or vegetable, and life or death. You want to kill people just because of different choices? You know I'm cold-blooded. You killing the Tangs will make me angry and sad, but it won't change my mind. Ning Ke looked at the market that had become a sea of blood and the broken limbs around the stall. He said, "You were chosen by human beings. Without human beings, you wouldn't have appeared. You can't treat them like this." Sang Sang frowned and said, "It was human beings' choice that I woke up. Do I have to let them decide my life and death? Can parents decide their children's life and death?" Ning Ke said, "No one wants you to die." She said calmly and firmly, "When I was born in the human world, I was secretly sent out of the mansion by that housekeeper. She wanted to drown me in a cesspool. It was also on that day in the woodshed that another housekeeper approached you with a hatchet. My life and death were almost decided by someone else, and so were yours. In the end, you snatched the hatchet. After I survived, I didn't want my life and death to be decided by someone else." Ning Ke was silent for a moment and said, "Yes, life and death can only be decided by oneself." Sang Sang said, "I don't want to die as long as I'm alive." Ning Ke's anger gradually turned into confusion. He didn't know how to calm her down. Her slightly trembling hands could kill people, and her thoughts could also kill people. He walked through the sea of blood and came to her. He reached out to hold her hand and gently pulled her into his arms. Then he hugged her tightly and sadly said in her ear, "I don't want you to die either." Sang Sang's body was a little stiff and then gradually softened. She clumsily leaned on his shoulder. Because they were about the same height, it looked a little uncoordinated. "I'd rather die than you." The two stood between the sea of blood and the broken bodies and held each other tightly. They looked calm and even sacred. Countless light spots flew out from them like stars and floated in all directions. As the light spots fell, the sticky blood on the ground of the market gradually faded until it was invisible. The bodies in the blood also disappeared, as if they had been purified by the divine. The pungent smell of blood could no longer be smelled in the market. There was only the smell of chicken feces, the earthy smell of river fish, the touching smell of onions, and the unique smell of vegetables. There was still dew on the green vegetables, which made them look extremely alluring. The newly unearthed tender bamboo shoots were arranged neatly and even had some dirt on them. They didn't look dirty but looked extremely beautiful. The market was filled with shouts and haggling sounds. Mothers were beating their children, puppies were fighting over bones, and wild cats were startled. Paw, paw, woof, woof, meow. It was a noisy mess. 2 copper coins for this scallion isn't expensive, right? Ning Ke opened his eyes and saw that the auntie was holding out a handful of tender green onions in front of him. Her face was full of pride, as if she thought that Ning Ke wouldn't feel embarrassed if he didn't buy it. He shook his head with a smile and patted Sang Sang in his arms to wake her up. Then he took her hand and walked out of the market. He didn't have any rice or vegetables in his hands, but he wasn't worried that there would be nothing to eat in the courtyard. As long as there is love, drinking water will fill one's stomach. Sang Sang didn't leave. She and Ning Ke continued to live an ordinary life in Chaoyang City, hiding from the wind and rain outside, walking between the courtyard and the market and strolling by the stream. Ning Ke was in charge of cooking, and Sang Sang was in charge of eating. Occasionally, when she was in a good mood, she would cook a bowl of fried egg noodles for Ning Quebec. There were still 4 Sichuan peppercorns and 30 chopped green onions in the clear soup. If you wanted to avoid boredom, you had to find ways to find new interests, see new sights, or relive old times from time to time. Ning Ke was very smart. Relying on the taste in his memory, he successfully taught himself the hot and sour sliced noodle soup. According to Sang Sang's expression, the taste was at least 70% as good as the one at Lin 47th Street. He buried 2 jars of yellow wine under the tree in the courtyard and made a jar of pickles in the kitchen. The jar was stuffed with milk, tender ginger, and green and red peppers. Anyone would drool when he opened the lid. Sang Sang was very satisfied with the pickles he made, but for some reason, she still liked to eat the simplest cabbage head in vinegar the most. They often left the hospital for a walk, watching the sunset over the lake, listening to the bell in the temple, and strolling around Chaoyang City. It was as if they had become lazy like this lazy city. In the spring rain, they visited the legendary 72 temples. In the autumn, they went to some other big cities in the Yueluan kingdom. In the cold snow, they went to the north. They spent the whole night in the bleak scenery of the Blue Pass. They held hands while they were doing these things. Perhaps it was because of the long walk, Sang Sang was a little tired and went to sleep when they returned to the small courtyard. From that day on, she became a little drowsy and slept longer and longer. When she slept, Ning Ke would lie beside her and read. He would hold her hand under the quilt with one hand while holding the book. Sometimes he would forget to put his hand back after turning a page. Sang Sang, who was sound asleep, would subconsciously reach out and pull his hand back under the quilt, holding it tightly in front of her chest and refusing to let go. On a certain autumn day, Chaoyang City was talking about the high monk of the White Tower Temple releasing animals. Ning Ke heard that after several buckets of loaches and various fish were thrown into the lake, there would be a very funny and bloody scene. He thought it was very interesting and wanted to take Sang Sang to see it. She was a little tired and did not want to leave the hospital, so she went by herself. The release was indeed very lively. Those loaches, eels, and various fishes killed each other, and it was really bloody. What those eminent monks did was really funny. Ning Ke was about to go home after watching it, when he suddenly had a strange feeling. Looking at the lake and the White Tower on the other side of the lake, he always felt that something was missing. The dense crowd of believers and tourists gradually dispersed. As the dusk deepened, the White Tower Temple gradually became quiet. He stood on the shore and looked at the tower in silence. That feeling was still lingering. At this moment, the bell for the evening class rang in the temple. This bell rang in his heart at the same time. The Buddhist bell could clear the heart and help believers meditate. Ning Ke had the fragments of lotus consciousness deep in his sense of perception, so he could naturally sense it more clearly. He subconsciously walked to the depths of the temple. Following the bell, he came to the front of the main hall of the White Tower Temple. He saw hundreds of monks chanting devoutly inside the threshold. With the chanting, the statue of Buddha in the hall seemed more and more merciful. Buddha was quietly looking at him. When the chanting entered his ears, it was the sound of Buddha. It was extremely beautiful. Ning Ke stood outside the threshold and gradually became obsessed. In the small courtyard, Sang Sang woke up. The black crow on the branch cawed strangely and flew away. Her eyes followed the black crow and fell on the sky. She felt that the sky was a little familiar and very beautiful. She looked at it for a long time and gradually became obsessed. Obsession arose from love. There was no wise man in love. Love did not know why. Obsession was stupidity. It is said that it is a supermoon today. The headmaster must be in a very good state, but I am in a very bad state. It is not because I am tired of writing 5 chapters yesterday, but because I plucked up the courage to eat a fish hot pot tonight. I am a little anxious and always feel that some joints are aching. Of course, I know this is not true. I am not as stupid as Ning Ke and Sang Sang, but I am timid. And with the 2,000 words today, I just finished writing greed, anger, and obsession. It feels like I have completed a very difficult task. I relaxed and found it hard to lift my spirits. Today is only 2,000 words. I will write slowly, but I don't know if I can finish it. In order to avoid wasting time, I will tell you in advance that even if I finish it, I will publish it tomorrow. Do you think it is possible for me to write some drafts? It seems difficult. Tomorrow will definitely continue. I have fallen in love with the rhythm of 15-15. Maybe it is because I have said it too much when I was a child. But I will never do something like 15-15. There will be 5 chapters tomorrow. It happens to be Monday, so I sincerely ask for recommendation votes. Student Yunkai asked me to write a single chapter to get votes. I have been thinking about it. It is not easy to endure for dozens of days. Although it is really painful to endure, should I endure it? Maybe I can't endure it tomorrow or the day after. Then we will talk about it. Thank you for your support. I am still full of energy and the quality of the article is good. Please vote for me. Thank you very much. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 955. A monk walked out of the hall. The monk was not very old. His face was dark, and he was slightly plump. The distance between his eyes was a little far, and he looked a little silly or perhaps naive. However, his eyes were extremely clear. The monk was holding a white and fat steamed bun in his hand and chewing it all the way. His face was full of joy. He didn't see the road clearly and bumped into Ning Quebec. Ouch. The monk rubbed his head and brushed his fingers over the scars. His left hand was still holding the steamed bun so tightly that his fingers sank into the white and soft bun. His eyes were full of tears. It seemed that he was really in pain. The monk bumped into him because he didn't see the road clearly. It had nothing to do with Ning Quebec. But somehow, Ning Ke felt pity for the monk and apologized gently. The monk looked at Ning Ke's face and was suddenly stunned. He forgot the pain and suddenly became happy. He put the steamed bun in front of Ning Ke and said with a smile, "My treat." Ning Ke was surprised and asked, "Why do you want to treat me?" The monk said, "Because you look like me. My master said that I am a good person, so you are also a good person." Ning Ke looked at his silly face and thought, "How do I look like you?" He asked, who are you? The monk answered honestly, my name is King Banzi. Ning Ke looked at his expression and tone and knew that his mind was probably not fully developed. So he asked casually, where do you come from, King Banzi? Monk Qingban refused to answer. He raised the steamed bun higher and almost touched Ning Ke's mouth. Ning Ke understood and took the steamed bun from his hand and took a bite. Monk Qingban clapped his hands happily and took Ning Ke's hand to a certain place on the temple wall. He pointed at the moss-covered stone steps outside a side door and said, I come from here. Ning Ke looked at the stone steps and vaguely understood that this person was probably an abandoned baby who was abandoned by his relatives and thrown on the stone steps outside the White Tower Temple. Then he was taken in by the monks in the temple and grew up like this. Why do you say that I look like you? He asked curiously. Monk Qingban pursed his lips and said shyly, my master said that I am an idiot with innate wisdom. My brothers in the temple also said that I am an idiot. You looked like an idiot before, so of course you have the innate wisdom. Ning Ke thought that the eminent monk Lotus was in his consciousness, so of course he had the innate wisdom. But, the monks in the temple said that Qingban was an idiot. What did it have to do with innate wisdom? Monk Qingban was so naive. Ning Ke naturally wouldn't say these things to add to his worries. So he let the monk hold his hand and wander in the temple. The bell in the temple rang far away, and Ning Ke gradually calmed down. The strange feeling he had when he saw the White Tower and the water shadow by the lake gradually disappeared, which made him feel very comfortable. In the meditation room of the side hall of the temple, Monk Qingban took out more than 300 Buddhist scriptures left by his master and showed them to Ning Ke, just like a child showing off his treasures to his friends. Ning Ke didn't want to disappoint him, so he picked up a Buddhist scripture and began to read it. He praised it from time to time. Monk Qingban was scratching his ears and cheeks with joy. There was a true meaning in the scripture. Ning Ke just praised it casually. But after reading it, he found it was really interesting. He gradually immersed himself in it and forgot to go back. When he woke up, it was already late at night. He felt very uneasy and quickly got up. He woke up Monk Qingban, who had fallen asleep on the futon, and left the White Tower Temple and walked back to the small courtyard. The reason why he felt uneasy was that he was so greedy for Buddhist scriptures that he forgot to cook dinner. Now the most important thing for Sang Sang was to eat and sleep. What would she think of him? Sang Sang was not in the small courtyard, but under a tree by the stream outside. Hearing Ning Ke's footsteps, she didn't turn around to look at him. Instead, she continued to look at the sky, and the small white flower in her hair trembled in the night wind. Ning Ke walked to her side and expressed his sincerest apologies for forgetting to cook dinner today. Sang Sang was in a good mood because she had been looking at the sky for a whole day. The sky was so beautiful that she had long forgotten to eat, so she showed her tolerance to Ning Quebec. That night, after dinner in the courtyard, Ning Ke talked about what he had seen and heard in the White Tower Temple today. He mentioned the silly monk Qingban and said, would you like to go with me tomorrow? It's always good to have some new friends. Sang Sang said like an ordinary housewife, but she didn't agree to go with him to the White Tower Temple tomorrow. She wanted to stay in the courtyard and look at the sky. The sky was so beautiful that she couldn't get enough of it. In the following days, apart from accompanying her to wander around the city, Ning Ke spent most of his time in the White Tower Temple. He talked with Monk Qingban, listened to the bell and read the Buddhist scriptures, and felt quite peaceful. Sometimes he would bring back some vegetarian food for Sang Sang to eat, but Sang Sang did not like it. Sang Sang was still sleepy. When she woke up, she would look at the sky from morning to dusk. Under the tree and by the stream, she quietly looked at the sky. She felt that the sky was beautiful, but also a little strange. One day, Ning Ke said that she could also look at the sky in the White Tower Temple. Sang Sang thought it was very reasonable, so she followed him to the White Tower Temple. Although she didn't like the vegetarian food and the monks in the temple, she thought that the lake was very beautiful, and the sky reflected in the lake was also very beautiful. So she began to sit by the lake and look at the sky. The days went on like this. Ning Ke and Sang Sang looked at the lake, the sky, and the Buddhist scriptures in the morning bell and the evening drum. They were calm and happy. Time passed slowly, and gradually they didn't know how long they had been. The bright bell reverberated among the peaks and in hundreds of temples, waking up many monks. Compared with the melodious and distant bell in the Xiankong temple in the past, today's bell seemed so strong and even a little anxious, because it was a warning. The bell transmitted countless messages and also pointed out the direction. More than 100 soldier monks walked out of the yellow temple on the west peak and rushed down the peak. They changed horses at the foot of the mountain and turned into a cloud of dust, riding along the mountain road to somewhere in the dark underground field at high speed. Their monk robes fluttered in the wind, and their momentum was shocking. The vast underground field had always seemed so quiet in the past countless years. But today, somewhere in the field, the sound of killing had already shaken the sky. Smoke and dust were everywhere, and the sound of shouting and the sound of weapons colliding could be heard everywhere. Among them, there were also the sad chanting of scriptures, which was very strange. The former Buddhist land had become a battlefield, and the once devout believers had already become bloodthirsty Ajuras. However, if killing was a sin, in fact, this place had always been a Shuraba. More than 100 soldier monks came to the periphery of the bloody battlefield with iron sticks in their hands and slowly stopped. Their horses gradually parted, and 4 monks wearing bamboo hats came out. The leading monk had a plain face and a determined expression. Even the shadow of the bamboo hat could not hide the tranquility in his eyes. He was Qi Nian, the world wayfarer of Buddhism. The other 3 monks wearing bamboo hats looked very old, and they were all the elders of the commandment hall of the Xiankong temple. Qi Nian quietly looked at the battlefield, but his eyes passed through the smoke and dust raised by the hooves of the horses and fell on the cliff far away. There were people on the cliff, and he was responsible for the world under the cliff. The nobles of dozens of tribes were armed and united. After dozens of days of desperate fighting, they finally stopped the slaves in front of the meadow beside the abandoned gold field. The Xiankong temple had also sent powerful soldier monks and strong cultivators. Logically speaking, the outcome of the war had already been decided. But Qi Nian still felt a little uneasy, because he always felt that that person would not admit defeat so easily. The rebellion of the serfs in the underground field had lasted for a year. In the beginning, the rebellion was just a riot of shepherds of a poor tribe by the cliff, and more than a dozen people were killed. The tribe tried to suppress it by force, and even invited a monk who was punished by the commandment hall to the holy mountain. Unexpectedly, the armed forces of the nobles of the tribe were all killed in the suppression, and the monk did not survive. The Xiankong temple still did not care much. They had ruled the underground world for countless generations, and the monks in the temple had long been used to it. Every few years, there would be descendants of sinners who would forget the mercy of the Buddha, and ungratefully try to get treatment that they were not qualified to get. But no matter how fierce the sinners were at the beginning, in the end, they only needed to send a few monks to suppress them, and they could also prove to the believers how powerful the holy mountain was. So why not? But the serfs' rebellion this time was very different from the countless rebellions in the past. The nobles gathered 200 cavalrymen to suppress the sinners made up of more than 100 sick and weak shepherds, but they still did not succeed. So they gathered more troops, but they still did not succeed. In the end, the nobles sent 1,000 cavalrymen, and even invited professional slave hunters, but they still did not succeed. The encirclement and suppression of the rebels never stopped, but not only did they not succeed, but the ranks of the rebels grew larger and larger, and several wandering ascetic monks died in the battle. News of this rebel army began to spread in the underground world, along with the legend that the rebel army had found the way to the true Elysium. Their innate desire for freedom and their innate hatred for suffering and inequality caused the rebel army to gain more and more sympathizers, and some even began to respond to them. Similar to the rebellion of the Cliffside tribe, the rebellions of other tribes in the underground world were often initiated by shepherds. Those who lived between heaven and earth for generations, accompanied by cattle and sheep, and were relatively free to migrate, had the strongest desire for freedom and the firmest resistance against exploitation. More and more people joined the rebellion, and the wilderness of the underground world became more and more chaotic. The order that had been maintained in the Buddhist kingdom for thousands of years began to be threatened, especially as more wandering ascetic monks were killed by the rebels. The Xiankong Temple could no longer watch calmly as before. The monks of the Xiankong Temple were practitioners, and for the serfs in the underground world, they were the living Buddhas who used to worship. Whether in terms of spirit or strength, the appearance of these monks was the most fatal blow to the rebellious serfs. In a very short time, most of the rebellions in the underground world were suppressed. However, some things were difficult to end once they started, some ideas were difficult to extinguish once they were born, and some bonfires were difficult to extinguish once they were lit. The fire of rebellion in the meadow seemed to be about to be extinguished, but who knew how many sparks were hidden under the weeds? A few months later, dozens of rebellions of various sizes occurred in the underground world. After suppressing one, the monks of the Xiankong Temple had to rush to another. What made them tired and helpless was that every time they finished suppressing a rebellion, a new one would occur. A single spark could start a prairie fire. Something happened and affected me. I must finish the 5 chapters today, but please understand that I don't have the time and energy to revise it. It may be rough. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 956. The rebellion spread like wildfire and had affected nearly 1/3 of the tribes. The rebel army, which started the rebellion and was also the strongest now, had more than 4,000 people. This rebel army was so strong that it took them a whole year to fight from the remote cliff to a place less than 200 miles away from the giant peak. Although the foundation of the Buddha kingdom seemed to be not really shaken, the Xiankong Temple had already felt a strong sense of danger. The monks could not allow the rebels to climb up to the divine mountain. Qi Nian, the world wayfarer of the Buddhism sect, was also a super powerful person in the Xiankong Temple. Since the rebellion became more and more popular, he had been guarding the mountain path that people had to pass through to reach the peak. He was like someone who was guarding the pass in front of the verdant canyon. However, as the rebel army approached, he could no longer sit still. Qi Nian knew the biggest difference between this rebellion and the countless rebellions in the past years. In the past, the rebellion in the underground world was only the instinctive anger of the serfs. But in this rebellion, the serfs were very clear about what they wanted. That was why they were so determined and brave. Someone brought hope to the serfs and pointed them a clear direction. At the same time, that person stood with the serfs and always rushed to the front on the battlefield. Thinking of that person's name, Qi Nian's expression became serious, and his eyes under the shadow of the bamboo hat became more determined. It was because he knew that that person was in the rebel army that he left the peak and came to this battlefield. He knew that the 3 elders of the commandment hall might not be able to stop that person. Facing that person, no matter how cautious the Xiankong Temple was, it was not an exaggeration. Qi Nian was even sure that if the chief monk was not indifferent on the cliff plateau, he would definitely take action himself. In the distant battlefield full of smoke and dust, the wildest sounds of fighting burst out. Qi Nian woke up from his meditation and looked at that place in silence. He knew that today's battle was about to end. As dusk came, several tribes lost nearly 1,000 people to stop the rebellious slaves at the other end of the meadow. Howls and groans could be heard everywhere in the wilderness. The battle temporarily stopped. Qi Nian and the other monks looked at the distant meadow with mixed feelings. In the camp of the rebellious serfs, there were a dozen very simple tents. The old people were treating the injured young people. There was smoke rising from the side of the tents. There was a big pot on the fire. They should be cooking mutton. In front of the tent in the middle, many people could be seen sitting there, as if they were listening to someone. The night in the underground world was longer than in the temples on the peak. Compared to the real world on the ground, it was even longer and a little tiresome. But Qi Nian was not tired. He stood quietly in the wilderness until the stars disappeared and the morning light shone again. Then he led the monks to the battlefield. More than a dozen nobles in luxurious clothes knelt on the meadow. They looked excited and awestruck. They did not dare to look up. For them, those who came down from the divine mountain were real Buddhas. The cavalrymen had already woken up. They were washing and eating with the help of the slaves. Voices also came from the camp of the rebels in the distance. There were no slaves there, but there were old people, women, and children. This rebel army had fought from the edge of the cliff all the way to the front of the peak. They had always brought the old, the sick, the disabled and the orphans of their own clan. From a military point of view, it was stupid and also very daunting. Qi Mian walked to the front. The nobles kept kissing the footprints left by him with devout fanaticism. He did not pay attention to them and quietly looked at the distant meadow. The elder of the commandment hall standing on his right looked at the meadow in the morning light and the slaves in shabby clothes who looked happy. He did not know why he suddenly felt extremely angry. All the sinners will go to hell. Following this cruel verdict, the fierce battle began once again. Thousands of cavalrymen gathered by several large tribes charged towards the rebel army. The cavalrymen on horseback brandished their snow-white scimitars and shouted obscenities. Their bloodshot eyes were filled with cruelty. The equipment of the tribal cavalrymen was naturally many times better than those of the rebel serfs. Especially the more than 200 cavalrymen in the front, they were fully armored, which formed a sharp contrast with the enemy. The sound of hooves was like a storm, and the blades were as bright as the sun. The tribal cavalrymen rushed to the wilderness hundreds of feet away from the serfs. Their battle cries seemed to shake the sky. A rain of arrows fell. With the eyesight of the monks of the Xiankong temple, they could clearly see that there were only dozens of archers in the rebel serfs. And the bows and arrows in their hands were so simple. Some of the arrows did not even have tail feathers. Who could be hit by such arrows? Even if they could, how could they pierce through the armor? The elder of the commandment hall showed a look of pity on his face. This kind of pity was naturally sarcasm. However, Qi Mian still looked serious. He had better eyesight and clearly saw that those arrows did not have arrowheads, but prismatic stones tied to them. Suddenly, a gust of wind rose above the meadow. The wind was a bit strange, because it was not unpredictable like the wind in nature. Instead, it blew straight to the tribal cavalrymen as if it had been ordered. The arrows without tail feathers could also fly in such a violent wind. They did not need to be accurate. They became faster and faster in the wind, and even became whistling arrow shadows. Bang, 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 bang. Dozens of dull sounds of impact sounded almost at the same time. The tribal cavalrymen in the front were like weeds cut by a sickle. They fell to the ground. Those cavalrymen who fell to the ground rolled in pain and kept spitting blood from their mouths. They could not get up. The next moment, they closed their eyes unwillingly. There was a clear dent on the armor of the dead cavalrymen. The rebellious serfs were short of food and clothing, and had no resources to make sharp arrowheads. Even with the help of the gust of wind, the arrows could not pierce through their armor. However, the arrows of the serfs were tied to stones. With the help of the wind, the stones fell on the armors like hammers, directly shattering the internal organs of the cavalrymen. The arrows and stones caused heavy casualties. However, there were too many of the tribal cavalrymen. The momentum of the charge was only slightly hindered, and then they continued to rush forward. Suddenly, the meadow was filled with the sound of fighting. This was a very asymmetrical battle. The tribal cavalrymen wore iron or leather armors and held sharp knives in their hands, while the serfs were dressed in rags. They were dark and thin, and their weapons were very simple. Most of them held bamboo spears, and a few serfs even held bones. Judging from the freshness of the bones, they were probably the leg bones from yesterday's pot. Equipment was indeed important in a battle, but the most important thing was always the people. The serfs had no armor or sharp knives, but they had courage, desire, and bones. Seeing the cavalrymen rushing over like iron, the serfs' faces turned pale, but they did not retreat. They raised the bamboo spears in their hands, and even though their hands were trembling like sieves, no one put them down and ran away. Puchi. The seemingly fragile bamboo spears pierced through the seemingly hard armors. Crack. The bamboo spears were broken by the huge impact of the cavalrymen. The serfs, whose hands had been shaken to the point of bleeding, screamed wildly and devoured the cavalrymen. The same scene happened everywhere around the meadow. The seemingly insufferably arrogant cavalrymen fell one after another in front of the seemingly vulnerable serfs, and were then piled to death. The cavalrymen lost their advantage in speed, and the serfs began to take advantage of their numbers. They picked up stones and brandished bones, frantically surrounded the nearest cavalrymen, and then began to smash them. They used rocks to smash the cavalry's chest armor until it was deformed, and they smashed the cavalry's head until it was deformed. They used the bone clubs in their hands to knock the cavalry unconscious, and then they smashed the other party's leg bones. The cavalry woke up from the pain again, waving the sabers in his hands randomly, and was finally smashed to death. Blood was splashed everywhere on the meadow, and the sound of broken bones and legs could be heard everywhere. The serfs were like beasts, screaming and smashing incessantly. They had lived in this gloomy wilderness for generations. They had been enslaved by the nobles and gurus. They had been smashed to death by these people with stones, and their bones and marrow were sucked out by these people. Today, it was finally their turn to smash these people to death, and it was their turn to smash these people's bones. Buddha had always talked about samsara, the cycle of cause and effect, and retribution to his disciples and believers. So this was retribution, this was cause and effect, and this was samsara. Looking at the bloody and tragic scene on the battlefield, and seeing the tribe getting more and more unfavorable situation, the eyes of the elder of the commandment hall no longer showed compassion, but only anger and coldness. Qin Yen was silent for a moment, and then said, "Buddha is merciful. Buddha is merciful." More than 100 soldier monks from the west peak of the Xiankong temple put their palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. There was no mercy in their voice, only indifference and determination. Accompanied by the chanting of Buddha, the soldier monks stabbed the iron sticks in their hands into the wilderness. It was as if a thunder had exploded in the wilderness. A strong force came from the bottom of the dense iron sticks and spread to the meadow. The wilderness was shaking, as if there was a Vajra walking under the ground. More than a dozen serfs were shaken into the air and then fell heavily to the ground. They were shocked to death. Buddha is merciful. The soldier monks chanted the name of Buddha again, pulled out the iron sticks from the wilderness, and rushed to the battlefield. For a moment, the shadows of the sticks were everywhere, and the monk robes were fluttering in the wind. It was indescribably solemn. The rebellious serfs who had once suddenly heard the name of Buddha and looked at the soldier monks. Their faces became very pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. For them, the soldier monks from the divine mountain were the living Buddhas. They were mortals, how could they fight against the living Buddhas? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the tent in the middle of the meadow. It seemed to be chanting scriptures. Hearing the voice, the serfs suddenly became determined. They held the iron knives and bamboo spears, and waved the bone sticks that were full of knife marks, and rushed to the soldier monks. The soldier monks were chanting the name of Buddha, and the name of Buddha was like thunder. The serfs were also chanting the name of Buddha. They were repeating the name of the person in the tent. The name of Buddha was very short, and they were very familiar with it. Each word was a sentence, and each word was sonorous and powerful, like real thunder. The second chapter, and with the help of the bone stick in this chapter, I recommend a Korean movie that I like very much, Yellow Sea. If you like this work, please come to Chidyen.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 957. The scripture was really short, only one sentence. The way the serfs recited the scripture was also very special, treating each word as a sentence. They would resolutely shout out the first word, and then be silent. When they thought there was no more, they would shout in unison again. The thunder in the sky did the same. Hundreds of monk soldiers chanted the 4 words of Buddha's mercy. Their monk robes fluttered in the wind. Their Zen hearts were firm, but there was no mercy in their eyes. Instead, they were full of anger. Thousands of serfs chanted the scripture together and resisted the power of the Buddha's name. They regained their courage and waved the simple weapons in their hands to attack the monk soldiers. With the sound of the Buddha's name, the monk soldiers descended to the human world like Buddha. The chanting was like thunder, and the mortals were like ghosts coming out of hell. The field was stained with blood, and the battle was extremely fierce. The nobles who were watching the battle were pale. They didn't expect that these untouchables could fight so fiercely with the living Buddha from the divine mountain. The elders of the commandment hall couldn't understand why these sinners had the courage to resist the power of the Buddha's words. Looking at the world of the bloody sea in front of them, they seemed to see countless evil ghosts and asuras. Qi Mian looked extremely solemn. He had been listening to the scripture that the serfs shouted out. After a long time, he finally understood that it was not scripture at all, but a sentence. Warrior. No. Can. E. No. Hong. E. It was a simple sentence with only 7 words. But the meaning of the sentence was profound enough to be remembered for 700 years. The power of the sentence was so great that it easily crushed the Buddha's words into pieces. The nobles couldn't understand it, the elders of the commandment hall couldn't understand it, and neither could Qi Mian. But he remembered one thing. He once heard from the dead Qi Mei that in front of the White Tower Temple, Mr. First of the Academy used only one sentence to break the Buddha's words of the chief preaching monk. At that time, Mr. First said, "The Master does not speak of supernatural powers and gods." At this time, Qi Mian naturally thought of the past. Could it be that the sentence that the sinners were shouting was also said by the headmaster? Even so, how could that person's Tao reach such a level? He was wrong. The words that reverberated in the wilderness and brought courage and perseverance to the serfs were not spoken by the headmaster, but by that person. These words were not said by Confucius, but were the requirements that that person had for himself, the expectations that he had for all living beings. These words contained the spirit of his life, and when 1,000 people shouted together, it was like thunder. A scholar must be resolute. At this time, the ordinary people who were fighting on the battlefield had been slaves for generations. They were not warriors, but when they said these words, they became warriors, they became noble people. Thus, they gained morale. The serfs charged towards the remaining soldiers and the living Buddha in their hearts. Their voices were like thunder. In the Buddhist scriptures, Buddha once explained the thunder in the sky as the friction or collision between clouds and the sky. In today's battlefield, the thunder was the collision between iron and iron. As the dust drifted in the meadow, an iron sword suddenly appeared. This iron sword was very straight. There was no existence in the world that could be straighter. This iron sword was very thick, so thick that it didn't seem like a sword, but more like a piece of stubborn iron. The iron sword whistled through the air and slashed down. A soldier monk raised his iron cudgel to meet the sword. With a thunderous sound, the iron cudgel suddenly shattered, and the soldier monk fell to the ground, spitting out blood. His body made countless crisp cracking sounds, and he died just like that. 10 iron cudgel broke through the air and pressed towards the iron sword like a group of mountains. The iron sword proudly lifted up. It was still only one sword, and there was only a thunderous sound. The 10 iron cudgel were like 10 pieces of straw, deformed and scattered in all directions, disappearing into the wild grass. The 10 soldier monk holding the iron cudgel were shaken away to some unknown place. There was a loud roar in the meadow. The leader of the soldier monk opened his mouth, showing his teeth and eyes, like a lion in front of the Buddha. He gathered countless chi of heaven and earth on the iron cudgel, and smashed it towards the iron sword. At this moment, a hand reached out from the dust and grabbed the hilt of the iron sword. The fingers of this hand were very slender, and the palm was very thick. Holding the iron sword, there was an indescribable sense of harmony. If this sense of harmony had to be described, it would probably be completely natural. A figure vaguely appeared in the dust. That person held the iron sword, and with a casual wave, he blocked the iron cudgel of the leader of the soldier monk that was smashing down with countless chi of heaven and earth. The iron sword and iron cudgel collided, and there were sparks, thunder, and a moment of silence. The leader of the soldier monk felt a terrifying power coming from the iron cudgel. The first impression of the power was that it was very violent, but on a deeper level, it was calm and orderly. He knew that he was no match for this level of power, and he would definitely be defeated. But as a top swordsman of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple, he thought that he had to block the iron sword for a moment, and he could not let down the dignity of the Buddhism sect. Therefore, he refused to let go of the iron cudgel and held it tightly. In the eyes of the bystanders, the iron sword just touched the monk's iron cudgel and then left. The figure in the dust ignored the leader of the soldier monk, and walked calmly past him. Boom, 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 boom. It was not until then that the real thunder exploded in the body of the leader of the soldier monk. His fingers were all broken into pieces, his wrist was broken into 2 pieces, and then his arm. The 2 arms of the leader of the soldier monk that were holding the iron cudgel were directly shattered into 2 pieces of flesh and blood by the iron sword, and then disappeared with the dust in the wilderness. With a miserable scream, the leader of the soldier monk knelt on the ground in pain. His face was extremely pale, and he wanted to hit his head to relieve the pain, but it was already impossible. The dust gradually settled, and the figure gradually appeared in front of everyone. His hair was very short, and the sharp stubble was like a forest of swords in the academy, facing the high and cold sky. His right arm was broken, but there was no wrinkle on the gently swinging sleeve. He wore a khaki frock, which had not been washed for a year, and was full of dust and blood at this moment, very dirty. But his expression was as if he was wearing a luxurious robe to participate in an ancient sacrificial ceremony. His expression was still calm and proud. His face was smeared with blood, his frock was stained with blood, and the iron sword in his left hand was dripping with blood. He was covered in blood. Judging from his appearance, he was just an ordinary monk. But when he walked out of the bloody battlefield, he was like a blood Buddha walking out of hell. There was a dead silence in the wilderness. Qi Nian and the elders of the commandment hall looked at the proudest and most terrifying Mr. Second in the back of the mountain of the academy, and thought of all the people he had killed in the underground world this year. They sighed and said, "Buddha is merciful." He said, "Buddha is pitiful." Qi Nian put his palms together and said, "That year in front of the verdant canyon, you fought against thousands of soldiers. But this is not the verdant canyon, but the Buddha land. Without the help of the academy, you have no chance of winning even if you fight until the end of time." He said, "A scholar is a gentleman, and a scholar must be resolute. The responsibility is heavy, and the road is long. Isn't it also heavy to be benevolent? Isn't it also long after death?" Qi Nian said, "You don't know the way, how about it?" He looked at the monks in front of him and said expressionlessly, "My name is Jun Amo. I have been taught by the teacher, and I only wish to be a gentleman in this life. Those who dare to stop me will die without a burial place." The 3rd chapter, this chapter is 2000. I was a bit confused just now, so I finished the 2nd chapter at 10:30, but I forgot to publish it. I will try to finish the 4th chapter before 2:00. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 958. Looking at Jun Mo's empty sleeve, Qi Nian said, "Your arm was cut off by Lu Bai, which means that you are stuck in the mortal world. What you need most now is the mercy of Buddha. That's why you left Chang'an and came here. In that case, why do you still resist? Why don't you really convert to Buddha?" Jun Mo looked at the mountain in front of the field. The mountain was only 200 miles away, which was very close, so it looked even more majestic. He slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, "How do I convert?" Qi Nian looked at the bleeding iron sword in his hand and said, "Put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha." There are statues of Buddha, skeletons, gold-cast instruments, and silver-inlaid skulls. Monks have prayer beads on their necks, and nobles have ears on their necks. This is not the Buddha kingdom, but hell. There are no living Buddhas here, only evil ghosts. Jun Mo withdrew his gaze and looked at him expressionlessly. If I really want to become a Buddha, how can I not kill all of you evil ghosts? Since I want to kill you, how can I put down the butcher's knife? In the mortal world, maybe you can put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. But here, picking up the butcher's knife is the way to become a Buddha. Qi Nian was silent for a long time. Then he looked at the ragged serfs and said, "Do you really think that you can take these people away by yourself?" Jun Mo said, "I wanted to take these people to build a road to the ground. Although the cliff is high, it can be built if we keep building it for generations. But now I feel that time is a little tight, so I changed the way. Since we can't get out, I will take them to the mountain to see the scenery." There were many mountains in the underground world, but there was only one real mountain, which was the Prajna mountain. At this time, it was reflecting the morning light in front of everyone's eyes, shining brightly. That mountain was the remains of Gautama Buddha. What Jun Mo had to do was to take the millions of serfs in the underground world to behave wildly on the remains of Gautama Buddha and enjoy the sunshine and warmth. Qi Nian slightly raised his eyebrows and looked angry. He shouted, "Don't deceive yourself. How can you do it alone?" Jun Mo stood in front of thousands of serfs and shouted, "Open your eyes. See how many people there are." Qi Nian was so angry that he laughed and said, "Do you expect to rely on these people to mess up the Buddha kingdom? Don't forget, these fools are like ants. How can they fly?" Jun Mo said coldly, "More than 20 years ago, you once said in the wilderness that there were flying ants that listened to the chief monk's sermon and flew away while bathing in the light. Now you even want to erase your own ideas?" Qi Nian's chest tightened, and his Zen heart was suddenly disturbed. He said, "These people are guilty, so they are stupid." Jun Mo said, "Do you know why Buddha set up a commandment that forbade the monks in the temple from teaching them words and knowledge, let alone teaching them the Dharma?" Qi Nian was silent, because none of the eminent monks of the past generations, including him, could figure out this problem. It was understandable that they did not pass on the written knowledge, but wouldn't it make the sinners more pious to cultivate Buddhism? Qi Nian, your faith is not as strong as you think. There are millions of serfs in the underground world. Any old woman would be 100 times better than you in this aspect. Jun Mo shouted, "Because you are literate, and because you cultivate Buddhism. Cultivation is always a matter of doubt. If you don't doubt, you don't cultivate. Therefore, cultivators will eventually doubt the Tao, and cultivators of Buddhism will naturally doubt the Buddha." Qi Nian's face was pale, and the back of his robe was wet with sweat. He gradually felt uneasy. Jun Mo looked into his eyes and said, "Buddha knew very well that only the truly stupid people would have the real firm faith. Therefore, he did not allow you disciples to teach the Dharma to the people in the underground world. He wanted these people to be stupid. Only in this way could he create the Western Nirvana, and then he was so confident that he dared to trap Haoyan. You said these people are guilty, so they are stupid? Bullshit. Their stupidity is the sin of your Buddha." Qi Nian wanted to say something, but Jun Mo did not give him a chance. He continued, "Besides, Buddha forbade you from teaching them Dharma knowledge because he was afraid. If everyone woke up and became Buddha, how could he maintain this evil nirvana? You bald donkeys, if you don't teach them words and Buddhist scriptures, they will naturally be stupid. Now I teach them words and wake them up. What I want to dig out is your foundation, and what I want to destroy is this Buddha land. I'd like to see how you can stop me." There were thousands of serfs standing behind Jun Mo. It seemed that they had not changed much from before. They were still ragged and dirty, and some of them even looked hungry. But if you looked closely, you would find that their eyes were still calm, not as numb as before. They became lively. The eyes of human beings were used to see and find freedom. Only then would they be lively, as if they were alive. That was the real life. During the year of the serfs' rebellion, apart from fighting everywhere and hiding from encirclement and suppression, the thing they spent the most time on was learning. At the beginning, Junmo taught the herdsmen of the tribe on the cliff to read. Then the herdsmen became teachers and taught other companions to read. They had never been in contact with knowledge or civilization. Once they started to learn, they became so hungry and began to grow at an unimaginable speed. Looking at the serf's eyes, Seventh Yi knew that Junmo was not lying. Thinking of Junmo's efforts and spirit in the process, he could not understand. He asked, "Why do you have such great malice against the Buddhism sect and the Buddha?" If he did not have great malice, he would not have made such a great effort. Why? Because all of you are evil. Junmo said, "I hate monks and Buddhist temples the most. In the human world, you do not produce, but specialize in cheating the poor of gold and silver. It is even more so here. How abominable it is. How can I not hate it? Of course, what the priests of Hautian Taoism do is no different from what you do." Seventh Yi silently thought that the Buddhism sect's shortcomings were also worse than Hautian Taoism's. Since you know this, why do you hate the Buddhism sect more? Because Hautian Taoism has never hidden their purpose. The priests of the West Hill Divine Palace want to rule the world. They want power and wealth to satisfy all kinds of desires. Even if they pretend to be benevolent and loving, they do it very casually and can no longer deceive more people. Junmo said, "The Buddhism sect is different. Your pretense is higher, your acting is better, your memorial archway is bigger, and your deceptions are deeper. I find it even more unpleasant." Seventh Yi said, "Is this the difference between a real villain and a hypocrite? It is the difference between a robber and a thief." Junmo's words directly reduced the noble Buddhism sect and Taoism sect to dust. Then he looked at the serfs around him and said, "Of course, here you have both." Seventh Yi said, "My sect also has countless brothers who cultivate diligently in the world and abide by the precepts. They are not greedy or angry, and they are merciful. Can't you see this?" Junmo looked at the giant peak in the distance and laughed. "Abide by the precepts? Your temple is full of thieves and prostitutes, and the mountain is full of illegitimate children. How dare you talk about this?" Seventh Yi said, "Master Chishan is the descendant of the former chief preaching monk. What do you think?" Junmo said, "Master Chishan is truly virtuous, so he left the Xiankong temple when he was young. Do you want to use him to gild the Xiankong temple's Buddha statue? Does the Buddha statue have any shame?" In his opinion, the Buddhism sect was full of hypocritical bald donkeys, just like what Qin Yan had done in the past. With a compassionate face, he deceived the eldest brother's kindness and set up a killing trap in the Lank temple. How shameless. Back then, Junmo killed Qin Yan with his iron sword. He first asked if a gentleman could be deceived. Later, he said that a gentleman should play with a square chess. He used the square iron sword in his hand to cut Qin Yan's outer body Dharmakaya. Today, in front of the Xiankong temple, in the Buddha kingdom, he used his words as a sword to cut Qin Yan's face. Why? Because he was in the right. If he was in the right, he could go anywhere in the world, no matter in the alley or the main road. Qin Yan had been practicing silent meditation for nearly 20 years, so he was not good at debating. Junmo's words had pierced the deepest part of his Zen heart. How could he say anything? He could not argue. Since he could not argue, he could only fight. Qin Yan stretched out a finger toward Junmo on the meadow. His finger broke the autumn wind and seemed to draw a circle casually. Then, a circle appeared behind his head, emitting endless light of Buddha. He retracted his finger and put his palms together in front of his chest. His body also began to emit light of Buddha. As his monk robe fluttered, the lines on the edge of his body strangely expanded into the air and instantly became countless times larger. Another Qin Yan appeared in the field, with a face full of anger. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were full of thunder, as if he could suppress all evil spirits in the world. It was his Dharmakaya, Akalanatha. First, he used the perfect Buddha's will, and then he used his Dharmakaya. But Qi Nian did not stop. The Dharmakaya of Akalanatha stretched out its right palm in the air and slightly bent its index finger. It was the mantra Mahamudra of the Buddhism sect. He practiced silent meditation, so he did not need to speak Buddha's words, and the Buddha's words would resound between heaven and earth. In the Buddha's words, the mountain-like Dharmakaya of Akalanatha pressed toward Jun Mo with the Mahamudra. The Mahamudra was still like a mountain. The endless mountains were stacked on top of each other, which was the wonderful meaning of prajna. Qi Nian was indeed a powerhouse of the Buddhism sect, a world wayfarer. His attacks were in the 3 levels of divine sense. Facing such a strong enemy, even Jun Mo gradually became serious. How could he break the 3 levels of divine sense? Just like facing those monk soldiers on the battlefield, Jun Mo used his sword. Still, he only used one sword. This did not mean that Jun Mo looked down on Qi Nian and regarded him as the same level as those monk soldiers. Previously, he only used one sword because one sword was enough. Now, he only used one sword because only one sword was enough. Jun Mo's seemingly simple sword strike actually encompassed all of his cultivation realms. The simplest was the most powerful. The broad and straight iron sword broke the autumn wind and stabbed on the mantra of Akalanatha. The Dharmakaya of Akalanatha was like a mountain, and so was the Mahamudra, which cast a large shadow on the field. In contrast, the iron sword in Jun Mo's hand looked like an inconspicuous wooden thorn. The thin wooden thorn stopped the palm that was falling from the sky. The wooden thorn even pierced through the palm. No matter how strong the palm was, once the thin wooden thorn pierced into the palm, it would be painful. The iron sword stabbed into the mantra of Akalanatha. Qi Ye's face was slightly pale, and his palms, which were put together, were bleeding. Chapter 4, I'm going to eat something. I'm too hungry. The next chapter will be later. Don't wait, everyone. Tomorrow will be the same. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 959. No matter what kind of divine sense it was, it would be broken by the sword. It was not because the divine sense was too weak, but because the iron sword was too strong. If the iron sword could break the Dharmakaya of the Akalanatha, it could also break the body. Qi Nian was injured in the first encounter. The 3 elders of Commandment Hall beside him suddenly looked shocked. Their thin chests suddenly swelled up as if they had inhaled a lot of autumn wind. As they breathed, a series of extremely complicated and difficult syllables came out of their lips at a high speed. The whistling sound was very scary. In this way, the elders of Commandment Hall finished chanting the text in a very short time. It was indeed difficult to understand because it was not an ordinary Buddhist scripture, but some kind of incantation. Cultivators had many means, such as talisman and psyche. The powerhouses of the Buddhism sect also had their own special skills, and the art of incantation was one of the most powerful. The incantation that the elders of Commandment Hall were chanting at this time was a wonderful method that countless former eminent monks of Xiankong Temple had practiced after thinking hard. Vairocana Devil Subduing Mantra. The most important thing for the former monks of Xiankong Temple was how to maintain the Buddhist kingdom in the depths of the West Wilderness. After Buddha's nirvana, how should the Buddhism sect deal with the demons with great divine sense come? Buddha had left a lot of legacies in this underground Buddhist kingdom. Not to mention the pear tree that Buddha had personally planted, the rocks that Buddha had personally refined, and the Prajna Peak was the remains of Buddha, so they shouldn't be worried. Unfortunately, the monks in the temple didn't know how to use these to deal with the enemy. Because of this, countless eminent monks racked their brains and finally found a way to use the power of the Buddhist kingdom with their collective wisdom. This method was similar to the law of words, but it had lower requirements for the caster. As long as the caster was willing to give up his flesh and longevity, he could borrow the infinite power left by Gautama Buddha from the Buddhist kingdom. This method was the mantra, the Vairocana exorcism mantra. This method was cruel to the spellcaster and always had an ominous bloody taste. Once it was used, it would be extremely powerful. Once the innocent was hurt, there was no way to save them. Therefore, the Xiankong Temple had always hidden this method in the commandment yard. Only the 3 elders of the commandment yard could practice it, and only the chief monk of scripture could decide when to use it. Jun Mo's cultivation of sword Tao was world-shocking. Now he was going to shake the foundation of the Buddhist kingdom with the serfs. Naturally, he was the great evil demon that Xiankong Temple had been wary of for countless generations. If he didn't use it now, when would he use it? The Vairocana devil subduing mantra rang out. The underground world immediately sensed it. The wind howled in the wilderness and the rocks rolled restlessly. The Prajna Peak 200 miles away seemed to tremble slightly. The east peak where the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple was located was even more furious. The yellow temple shone brightly. In a flash, a beam of Buddhist light rose from the east peak to the sky. The Prajna Peak was transformed from the body of the Buddha. The Mahavira Hall on the peak was the head of the Buddha. The left palm was placed in front of him, facing the sky, which was the cliff plateau where the pear tree was located. The right palm was put together with the Anjali Mudra, which was another wonderful place. The east and west peaks were the left and right shoulders of the Buddha. The Buddha's light soared into the sky, as if there was something on the shoulders of the Buddha. Vajra exorcism pestle. A strong wind blew. The Vajra exorcism pestle flew down from the east peak and smashed towards Jun Mo's head. This demon-subduing pestle had no specific shape, but the Buddhist light field was dozens of feet wide. Even if Jun Mo could avoid it, the majority of the thousands of serfs behind him would be smashed to death by this pestle. Jun Mo's face suddenly turned pale. With a clear roar, his monk robe fluttered, and the iron sword floated in the air in front of him. He no longer held the sword with his left hand, but stretched out his right hand to hold the hilt. His right arm was cut off by Lu Bai in front of the verdant canyon, leaving only an empty sleeve. Holding the hilt with his right hand was like rolling the sword with his sleeve. The power of the iron sword suddenly increased. There was a loud bang. The iron sword and the Vajra exorcism pestle met in the sky above the meadow. Although this Vajra exorcism pestle was not performed by the Buddha himself, it was borrowed by the power of the Buddha by the 3rd elder of the commandment yard. The Vajra exorcism seemed to contain the power of the entire Buddha kingdom. Jun Mo was famous for his swordsmanship. After Lu Bai's death, he was undoubtedly the best in the world. However, his swordsmanship was all in his right hand. After losing his arm, he had no hope of peeping into the way of heaven. Even his state and strength had declined a lot. That was why he came to the Xiankong Temple to cultivate Buddhism, hoping to find another way. For a whole year, he did not cultivate Buddhism, so naturally he did not find a second way. However, he went further and further on the original path, and walked more and more firmly. Who said that without the right hand, one could not enter the way of heaven with the sword? Whether it was a left-handed sword or a right-handed sword, it was a sword anyway. As long as his spirit and courage were still there, he could hold the sword with his right hand if he wanted to. Jun Mo's sword was like a country, and even the Buddha kingdom was shattered. The Buddha's light shook, and the Vajra exorcism pestle was broken. It turned into countless golden flowers, falling on the meadow and the stream, as if it was more beautiful than the golden sand flowing out of the abandoned gold field. The 3rd elder of the commandment yard suffered from the backfire of the sutra incantation. His spirits suddenly dimmed, and his face gradually withered. Jun Mo, who had cut the Buddha's exorcism pestle with the iron sword, was naturally not well. He was shaken hundreds of feet away like a flying stone. The weeds under his feet were all crushed, and the golden flowers were flattened. Blood oozed from the corners of his mouth. He finally stopped moving backward. He sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to meditate. He began to restore his psyche power to heal himself, regardless of the blood flowing from the corners of his mouth. Thousands of surf warriors suddenly separated, and then suddenly gathered together, surrounding him in the deepest part of the crowd. They raised their weapons and stared at the enemy in the distance. They looked vigilant and firm, giving people a feeling that if someone wanted to kill Jun Mo at this time, they must first kill all of these serfs, and not even one of them could be left. Protect the living Buddha! The surf warriors shouted in a hoarse voice, cheering for their companions. Although they were a little uneasy, no one showed panic, and orderly and quickly arranged the camp. What Qi Mian said before was right. Jun Mo had fought against thousands of troops in front of the verdant canyon, and the West Hill Divine Palace coalition army could not take a step forward. That was because of the terrain, and it was inseparable from the help of the academy, and it was only for 7 days. Now he led the old, weak and sick serfs to fight for a whole year. They had been fighting hard, and he was already exhausted. He did not know how many times his psyche power would be exhausted. Today he broke the Vairocana devil subduing mantra of the third elder of the commandment yard with the iron sword, and he was also seriously injured. His psyche power was in urgent need of recovery. Fortunately, he was very skilled in cooperating with the surf warriors, or it would be really dangerous. At this time, more than 100 soldier monks were dead or disabled. The third elder of the commandment yard sat cross-legged and adjusted his breath. If they wanted to forcibly break through the desperate defense of the surf warriors and kill Jun Mo, only Qi Mian could do it. Qi Mian looked at the drop of red blood in his palm, and then looked at the people in ragged clothes in the distance. His emotions were very complicated, so complicated that he could not make a decision to fight. The eyes of those serfs were so angry and so hateful. No one knew how terrible the fighting power they would burst out. More importantly, could they defeat the injured Jun Mo? In front of the verdant canyon, Jun Mo's arm was cut off by Lu Bai, and the world sighed because everyone, including the chief monk of scripture and the abbey dean, thought that he would never reach the way of heaven in this life. In recent years, the so-called generation of destiny began to appear in the cultivation world. In the unknown places of one temple, one Taoist temple, one school, and one second floor, there appeared a generation of geniuses, Tang of the Devil's Doctrine, Yi Su of the Haotian Taoism, Mr. First and Mr. Second of the Academy, and Qi Nian of the Buddhism sect. Lu Bai and the Master of Calligraphy were half a generation earlier than them, while Yi Hongyu, Chen Pipi, Ning Ke, Mo Shanshan, Tang Xiaotang, and Long Qing were half a generation later than them. Therefore, they were called the generation of destiny because they had the highest state, the most hope, the most vitality, and the most imagination. Among this generation, it was a fact that the eldest brother of the academy, Li Man, was the strongest. In the war against the Tang Empire, this gentle scholar showed a wonderful state, which also proved this. Below the eldest brother were Jun Mo, Yi Su, Tang, and Qi Nian. The four of them walked side by side, and no one knew who was a little stronger and who was a little slower. In the Battle of the Verdant Canyon, Jun Mo defeated Yi Su and became the strongest among the four. But soon his arm was cut off by Lu Bai, and he could no longer maintain his position. Qi Nian thought that he could defeat Jun Mo, but it seemed that it was not so. In the long and hard battle in the underground world for a year, Jun Mo became much weaker because he had consumed too much energy. But at the same time, he also became much stronger because his will was tempered to be stronger, so strong that it could even affect the reality. Seeing that Jun Mo broke the Akalanatha with his sword and cut the Vajra scepter of Buddha, Qi Nian knew that Jun Mo's state had at least recovered to 90% of his heyday. In terms of sword Taoism, he was even better. How on earth did he do it? Qi Nian was a little confused and hesitated. It was at this moment that he missed the best time to attack. In the distance, the crowd gradually separated, and Jun Mo came back with the iron sword in his hand. His lips were still overflowing with blood, and his face was still pale. But since he stood up again with the iron sword in his hand, it meant that he had recovered enough psyche power after a short period of meditation. At least he thought that it was enough to defeat Qi Nian. Qi Nian asked himself again, how on earth did he do it? The shock and confusion of the enemy was the source of the confidence of his companions. The surf warriors held up the bamboo spears and bone sticks in their hands and looked at Junmo as if they were looking at an invincible god. Guru is mighty. The living Buddha's power is unparalleled. Hearing these words, Qin Yen thought of the serfs shouting to protect the living Buddha and suddenly laughed. He looked at Junmo and said sarcastically, "You want to destroy the Buddha, but in the end, you still have to use the name of Buddha to drive these ignorant sinners. Don't you think it's ridiculous?" Junmo raised the iron sword, and the fanatical shouting behind him stopped instantly. He carried the iron sword on his back. Although thousands of serfs were a little confused, none of them hesitated. They retreated as fast as they could, taking the important supplies and fled to the depths of the field. Qin Yen looked at the serfs who quickly retreated like the tide. He frowned slightly and was puzzled. Junmo said, "Why is it ridiculous?" Qin Yen said, "If you are the Buddha, do you have to destroy yourself first to destroy the Buddha?" Junmo said, "I am the real Buddha, and your Buddha is the fake Buddha." Qin Yen shouted, "How dare you say such nonsense in front of Buddha?" Junmo straightened the iron sword and said, "If I am the Buddha, he can only be the fake Buddha when Buddha comes to see me." An elder of Commandment Hall heard this and said angrily, "Today I will send you to see Buddha." Junmo ignored him and looked at Qin Yen and said, "Don't you understand?" Qin Yen thought of a possibility and his expression changed slightly. He said, "What on earth do you want to do?" Junmo said, "I took 3,000 soldiers and traveled for 700 miles, just to get you and these old monks to come here." Qin Yen stared at his eyes and said, "Then?" Junmo said, "At this time, there are no more powerful cultivators on the peak. As long as I get through you, I will meet my senior brother on the cliff platform. We will kill the chief monk first and then cut the chessboard. How about that?" Qin Yen's face turned pale and said, "Your goal has always been that chessboard?" Junmo said, "Of course, my junior brother is in the chessboard. How can I not save him?" Qin Yen was silent for a moment and suddenly said, "Are you sure you can get through us?" Junmo said, "I didn't know at first, because I was not sure how much of my state I had recovered. Previously, I killed the Wisdom King and broke the Buddhist pestle, so I am very sure that as long as I am not in the peak, you can't stop me." Qin Yen looked at him and said, "Do you know what is in the chessboard?" Junmo looked at him and said, "I said before that even if Buddha is in front of me, I will say that he is the fake Buddha." Qin Yen said, "You want to see Buddha?" Junmo pointed at the Prajna peak and said, "If the mountain doesn't come to me, I will go to the mountain. If Buddha is in the mountain and he doesn't come to see me, I will go to see him." Qin Yen asked, "Even if you can see Buddha, what can you do?" Junmo said, "To destroy this hellish Buddha land, there is no faster way than to kill Buddha. Anyway, it is the same sword. I have to try." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 960. From the beginning to the end, what Junmo wanted to do was to overthrow Xiankong Temple's rule over the underground world. But right now, what he wanted to do most was to go to the cliff plateau and take away the chessboard left by Buddha. Because Ning Ke was now trapped in the chessboard, and he did not know whether he was alive or dead. And because Ning Ke was his younger brother. There were countless temples and unknown Buddhist formations in that majestic mountain, as well as powerhouses of the Buddhism sect like Qin Yen and the Commandment Hall elders. He did not think that he could force his way up. So he led the rebellious serfs to kill in the wilderness and lured Qin Yen and the Commandment Hall elders here. As long as he could get past these 4 people, Junmo would be able to go straight to the peak. If he could kill these 4 people along the way, it would naturally be even better. Because regardless of whether he could take away the chessboard or not, exterminating Buddhism had already become the most important part of his life, and it had to continue. Until now, Qin Yen finally understood why the fighting style of the rebellious army had changed so much these days. The marching route was no longer strange, and they bravely rushed to the foot of the peak. They did not care about the strength of the rebellious army. Even if they reached the foot of the peak, they would be annihilated in the end. It turned out that they wanted to scare the tiger in the mountain. They wanted to lure the tiger in the mountain to Pingyang, and what Jun Mo wanted to do was to enter the mountain and take away the chessboard. Looking at the surf rebels retreating like the tide, Qi Mian was silent. He knew that he and the 3 elders of the commandment hall might not be able to stop Jun Mo. Through the previous battle, Jun Mo had completely grasped the strength of the 2 sides. He was very confident that he could get past this barrier, or he would not let those who followed him retreat first. If it was in the mountain or on the mountain road, Qi Mian was confident that even if Jun Mo became stronger, he would not be able to step on the stone steps with the help of more than 10,000 monks of Xiankong Temple. But now the wilderness was so open. How could he stop him? Qi Mian's face was pale, but his eyes were calm. He looked at Jun Mo, who was walking slowly towards him, and looked at the iron sword in his left hand. He took a deep breath of the slightly cold autumn wind. His monk's robe danced wildly. Because of the sudden autumn wind, he only took a deep breath, and the countless autumn winds between heaven and earth all entered between his lips and began to wash his Buddha heart. With such a Buddha's might, heaven and earth naturally sensed it. Silk-shaped clouds floated in the dark blue sky. Those clouds were pulled even thinner, as though they were sugar threads that could not be pulled no matter how hard one pulled. All the weeds within a 1-mile radius suddenly bent down and fell to the ground, as if they were worshipping, revealing the white bones of humans and beasts, as well as the dust-covered gems, which were rolling in the wind. The stream flowing in the abandoned gold sand field was so shallow and clear, but at this moment, the crazy autumn wind blew out countless ripples, and the mud at the bottom of the stream was suffused with the color of water. Qi Mian opened his lips and started the silent meditation that he had cultivated for 20 years. The Zen Dharma closed his mouth and did not speak. When he opened his mouth, there was no sound. Only a wisp of wind slowly flowed out from between his lips. This wisp of wind was so gentle, so merciful, and there was a faint scent of sandalwood in it. In the endless chill of the autumn wind, he found the gentle feeling of spring wind. This was the ability of silent meditation. The faint scent of sandalwood and the fresh smell of the wind were dependent on each other, but did not mix. The silence of Buddhism was not really silence. Thunder could be heard in the silence. There was a thunder-like Buddha roar in the sandalwood that was slowly sent out by the wisp of wind, just like the heavy rain always accumulated in the thick clouds like cotton. When the thick clouds suddenly dispersed, there was a heavy rain and thunder. The roar of Buddha suppressed Jun Mo in this desolate field, and at the same time informed the monks in the Xiankong Temple among the peaks. Breathing was the most common, the most easily forgotten movement of the human body, so it was natural and fast. In Buddhism, breathing was also a measure of time, which was extremely short. Within a breath, Qi Mian started the great magic power of the Buddhism sect. Who could be faster than him? Jun Mo's sword was faster than breathing, faster than the autumn wind, faster than the heavy rain. In the blink of an eye, it came to Qi Mian's front, in front of his eyes, and in front of his lips. This iron sword seemed to be even faster than the silent sound. Jun Mo's sword came to a foot in front of Qi Mian. Jun Mo's sword was Jun Mo. Qi Mian naturally came to a foot in front of Jun Mo. Starting from Lu Bai, the swordsmanship in the human world had undergone earth-shaking changes. The lonely and invincible sage of sword finally wanted to turn the world upside down and then died. But the true meaning of his swordsmanship was left in the human world, and it began to shine in the hands of many people. The disciples of the sword Garrett, Ning Ke, and Yi Hongyu all had Lu Bai's sword. The one who was most qualified to inherit Lu Bai's swordsmanship and could even go further was, of course, Jun Mo. He was Lu Bai's strongest opponent in swordsmanship in this life, and he was naturally Lu Bai's confidant. Even Sang Sang could not avoid Lu Bai's sword, and could only use her own world to block it. Then how many people could avoid Jun Mo's sword? At least, Qi Mian could not do it. Qi Mian knew that he could not avoid this sword, so he did not think about it from the beginning. He just gently blew at the iron sword. It was still a gentle breeze from the beautiful spring, but it was condensed by the endless autumn wind. It contained the true meaning of Buddhism, the reincarnation of all things withering and rebirth, and it could eliminate all the killing intent in the world. Jun Mo's iron sword could not move forward, because he could not pierce through the cycle of life. The sword could not fall from the front. He turned his wrist, and the iron sword flew away from the breeze as soon as it touched it. It suddenly turned in the air without a trace of autumn wind, and slashed at Qin Yan's neck. The iron sword whistled through the wind, and Qin Yan's eyes suddenly brightened, like the gems on the Buddha statue. He still could not avoid this sword, so he did not avoid it. His right hand, which was put together in front of his chest, came to his face. 3 of his fingers were naturally hanging down, and the other 2 fingers seemed to be touching, as if he was holding an invisible flower, facing the edge of the sword. The iron sword was broad and thick, but it had the intent of sharpness. The invisible flower between Qin Yan's fingers had the sense of tranquility and zen. This flower was not a flower of the human world. Even in the spring wind, it would not invite bees to fall, so the edge of the sword could not fall. The iron sword was gently pinched by Qin Yan's fingers. Jun Mo withdrew the sword. This movement seemed simple, but in fact it represented an extremely shocking state. How many people in the world could walk away from the pinching flower fingers, regardless of illusion and reality? Jun Mo still looked calm. He flicked his right sleeve and took a step forward to the right. The iron sword in his left hand was pushed to the back by the sleeve wind, and then he slapped at Qin Yan's cheek with the back of his hand. A forward sword, a reverse sword. Anyway, it was a sword. Let's see how you can block it. Qin Yan could not block it, so he had to take it head-on. The Buddha's light shone, and the Dharmakaya of Akalanatha appeared in the field again. Then in an instant, it disappeared into his body. Being invisible did not mean that it did not exist. The Dharmakaya of Akalanatha was taken back by Qin Yan. From this moment on, it was no longer an external Dharmakaya, but a Dharmakaya. His body was as strong as King Kong. The iron sword fell heavily on Qin Yan's cheek. There was a crisp sound, like a slap in the face. A very clear red mark appeared on Qin Yan's cheek, as if he had been slapped. Then his face swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. 9 of his strongest teeth were slapped off and shattered into pieces. The pieces spread in his mouth, and blood flowed down from the corner of his lips. Body as the Dharmakaya of Akalanatha, as strong as King Kong? As long as it was not like the chief monk of scripture who had become a Buddha with his body, there was no reason that Jun Mo's sword could not smash him. Qin Yan felt very painful, and also very humiliated. He was the world wayfarer of Buddhism, and was recognized by the cultivation world as a powerhouse of the destined generation. But today, he was defeated by Jun Mo in such a contemptuous way. How could he not be humiliated? Because of the pain and humiliation, his Zen heart could not calm down and began to tremble. The corner of his mouth that was overflowing with blood also began to twitch. The breeze that blew out from his lips could not continue and scattered into a ball to protect his face. Although he was very angry, he clearly knew that if he did not protect his most dangerous face, Jun Mo's next sword was very likely to directly smash his head into pieces. Jun Mo did not continue to attack, because the 3 Commandment Hall elders were ready to attack at this time behind Qin Yan. He just wanted to break into the mountain, and did not want to stay here for long. Jun Mo's blood-colored monk robe fluttered slightly. He stepped on Qin Yan's head with his right foot, forcibly interrupting the second silent meditation that he was preparing, and landed among the 3 Commandment Hall elders. The 3 Commandment Hall elders sat in 3 places, forming a triangle. The distance between them was exactly the same, which was the standard number of 3 by 3, which was the number of Buddhism. The elder with the highest cultivation sat in the direction of the foot of the mountain, which was in front of Jun Mo's path. If Jun Mo wanted to go up the mountain, he had to pass this person before Qin Yan turned around. It was the iron sword that came to the elder. The Commandment Hall elder looked slightly serious, and the prayer beads in his hand shone and stopped the iron sword. The other two elders began to chant scriptures. Mo reached out to hold the iron sword, and the prayer beads suddenly broke, turning into Buddha beads all over the sky. The Commandment Hall elders shouted in unison. The string of prayer beads instantly exploded, and the Buddha's power shrouded the field. Mo swept up, stepped on the elder's head, jumped high, and then landed on the ground in the distance. Just like that, he charged forward, completely unreasonable. The divine powers in the Buddha beads all landed on his body. The Commandment Hall elders looked at Mo, who was rushing forward at a high speed in the field, and saw the fresh blood flowing out of his body. They knew that he must have been seriously injured, and could not help but feel a little shocked. He left just like that without even unleashing a single sword strike. He'd rather get injured than stop and fight a single battle. Was this still the proud and conceited Mo? In the desolate field, the blood-colored monk robe fluttered in the autumn wind. Mo was like a graceful swan, and with the momentum of the chi of heaven and earth, he rushed to the mountain in a flash. He was still the proud Mo. But he was just confident, and never conceded. No matter how strong the enemy was, he would not be afraid. Anyway, he would fight with his sword. But if it was necessary, he could temporarily ignore his pride. He wanted to grab the chessboard, and he had to take advantage of the time when Qin Yan and the three Commandment Hall elders were not in the peak. What he needed was time, and nothing else mattered. Of course, this did not mean that he would not care about the injury he got today, but he would deal with it later. In the future on the battlefield, he believed that he would meet Qin Yan and the three presidents of the Commandment Hall again. Anyway, they would meet again, and at that time, he would naturally fight with his sword again. This chapter is all for today, and there will be 3 chapters tomorrow. I wish everyone a good mood and good health. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 961. A firework lit up the dimly lit underground field. A cloud of smoke and dust cut through the surface of the field and quickly extended to the giant peak ahead. Mo was at the forefront of the smoke and dust. He rode the wind with the help of the chi of heaven and earth. The iron sword in front of him broke the wind silently like a real sword, moving forward at an unimaginable speed. The firework was a warning. The alarm in the giant peak rang loudly. Countless monks rushed out of the temple and came to the mountain road, ready to set up a great formation of Buddhism to suppress the invading enemy. Mo, who had turned into a sword, was so fast that he was even faster than the light that shot toward the giant peak. He had already reached the foot of the mountain before the formation of Buddhism was completed. The autumn mountain was silent. The green bamboos on both sides of the mountain road suddenly swayed. The monks saw Mo coming and saw the iron sword in his hand. The monks of Xiankong Temple took action, so Mo naturally took out his sword. He came so fast that the formation of Buddhism on the mountain road between the peaks was not completed, but he just broke through it unreasonably. Until then, the autumn wind suddenly rose and whistled back and forth between the bamboo forest and the mountain road. There were dozens of blood stains on the green bamboos, which looked like red tear stains. No matter whether the blood stained the bamboos belonged to monks or Mo, he had entered the depths of the giant peak and was rushing on his own path, his way of being a gentleman. Mo's way of being a gentleman was to reason with the enemy first. If the enemy did not listen, then he would crush them. In the field at the foot of the mountain, he had already talked a lot with Xiankong Temple. Since the Xiankong Temple did not listen, he would not continue to talk and crush them directly. Qin Yan and the third elder of Commandment Yard were still rushing back from the field. The powerful people in the temples had no time to react. Mo crushed them all the way. He held the iron sword in his hand and directly killed his way to the cliff plateau, covered in blood. The edge of the giant pit was full of steep cliffs. The cliffs cut a very deep hole in the wilderness, and then extended and finally converged in the distance. It was very shocking to see. The autumn wind had yet to rise in the wilderness. Not far away, there was a lonely Bodhi tree. Its green leaves were still round and motionless. However, there was a trail of smoke near the cliff. The so-called smoke and dust were actually countless dust particles and pebbles moving at an unimaginably high speed in the space next to the cliff. They looked like countless extremely thin threads. However long the cliff was, this streak of smoke was as long as the cliff. It stretched for thousands of li without a beginning or end in sight. It surrounded the world below the cliff like a miracle. It was unknown why it appeared. Amidst the smoke and dust, thousands of figures could be vaguely seen. In fact, it was not that they could be seen, but because those figures were moving too fast, even faster than what the naked eye could see. Those figures could overlap in countless places in an instant, creating this illusion. Among the thousands of figures, there were only two people. Two people who kept chasing each other. Suddenly, the melodious sound of a bell came from the distant giant peak. The thousands of miles of smoke and dust at the edge of the cliff suddenly stopped, and then slowly fell back to the plains. Where the smoke and dust settled, two people showed up. The scholar in a cotton-padded jacket had a cloth belt around his waist, and there was an inconspicuous wooden stick in it. He looked gentle and dusty, but extremely clean. He was the eldest brother of the academy. The middle-aged scholar opposite him had a flagon tied to his waist. He was the drunkard. Hundreds of white threads seeped out of the eldest brother's cotton-padded jacket and dragged for thousands of feet. They were gently fluttering in the autumn wind. It was very elegant, but inevitably looked a little weird. The pursuit in the distanceless state was too fast. The eldest brother's cotton-padded jacket was not ordinary. It did not tear in such a high-speed movement. However, the cotton in the interlayer of the jacket was squeezed out of the fine holes in the cotton cloth, and became the thinnest cotton thread. Hundreds of cotton threads were fluttering behind him. It was indeed a little hard to describe. Especially as the wind gradually changed, some of the cotton threads fell on his face, which looked even more funny, or even cute. The drunkard took down the flagon and drank endlessly. He was still relaxed after such a long pursuit in the distanceless state, but his hand holding the flagon was slightly trembling. The eldest brother looked at him drinking without saying a word. When he was a little tipsy, the drunkard put down the flagon and looked at him with mixed feelings. He said, "Li man, you have become faster, but you are still not as fast as me." The eldest brother smiled gently and said, "You did not catch up with me." The drunkard was silent for a moment, and then asked, "Why?" There were many whys in the world, at least more than 100,000 whys. What he wanted to ask was, of course, why the academy was against the Buddhism sect, because it meant that they were on the side of Haotian. In fact, I sometimes ask myself the same question. The eldest brother thought for a moment and then said, "I figured it out later." The youngest brother and Haotian were trapped in the chessboard, and they were in such a relationship. So if we want the youngest brother to come out, we have to save Haotian. We are not against the Buddhism sect, nor do we want to be friends with Haotian. We just want to save people. For the academy, saving people was always the most important thing, whether it was to save humans or to save the youngest brother. As for the pros and cons, they had to put aside for now. Once they started to consider the pros and cons, the academy would no longer be the academy. The drunkard frowned slightly and asked, "What is the academy trying to do?" The eldest brother said with a smile, "The master has his own ideas, and so do your disciples. What the academy is trying to do may seem ridiculous to you, but it should be interesting." The drunkard said, "The Buddha also has his own plan. He has waited for countless years until Haotian is weakened by the academy. When she and the mortals enter the knowing destiny state, it is probably the only and last hope for the academy to represent human beings. How can you destroy it?" The eldest brother shook his head and said, "The academy has never thought about representing human beings. We are just doing what we think is beneficial to human beings, and we do it ourselves first." The drunkard said, then why do you want to stop the Buddhism sect from killing Haotian? The eldest brother said, first of all, it is the same reason I told you before. We want to save people. Secondly, Haotian is in the divine kingdom, so Sang Sang cannot be killed. Sang Sang was Haotian, and Haotian was Sang Sang. But Sang Sang was in the human world, and Haotian was in the divine kingdom. If the two existences could not be wiped out at the same time, Haotian would never be killed. The eldest brother said again, if so, the Buddhism sect can't kill Haotian by killing Sang Sang. Instead, it will make her disappear and return to the divine kingdom. Haotian will become more powerful. It sounded hard to understand, but it was easy for people like the drunkard and the eldest brother to understand. That was why the academy had never figured out why the drunkard did it. The drunkard remained silent. The eldest brother understood and sighed, is that what the Abbey Dean is thinking? The drunkard looked up at the gray sky and said, yes. Sang Sang could be killed or awakened by the Buddha's ordeal. Either way, she could return to the divine kingdom of Haotian. That was what the Abbey Dean was thinking. Abbey Dean, the eldest brother realized that no words were suitable to describe the Abbey Dean. He said, it seems that the chessboard could really kill her. The drunkard said, she will definitely die. That was the Abbey Dean's judgment. Even though he was a disabled man now, both the drunkard and the eldest brother knew that his judgment was correct. The eldest brother looked at the mountain in the distance quietly and then pulled out the wooden stick from his waist. He didn't know how to fight before, so he never carried a weapon. Later on, he was forced to learn how to fight in the Pamir Mountains, so he broke the water ladle that he always carried with him. When he was chasing the Abbey Dean that year, he picked up a wooden stick on the beach of a small island in the South Sea. From that day on, the stick became his weapon. The stick was left by the headmaster in the human world. The eldest brother pulled out the stick, which meant that he was ready to fight. In other words, he was ready to risk his life. The Abbey Dean said that Sang Sang would definitely die in the Buddha's chessboard. Then Ning Ke, who was connected to her in life, would definitely die as well. As Ning Ke's senior brother, the eldest brother naturally had to risk his life. Everyone in the cultivation world knew that people in the academy were good at risking their lives. When they risked their lives, everyone would be afraid. Not only the famous crazy Ku of the last generation, but also the current generation. When Jun Mo risked his life, the army couldn't move forward and the Yellow River flowed backward. When Yulian risked her life, she dared to fly up to the sky and cut off the rainbow. As for the most terrifying one, it was Mr. First of the academy. The eldest brother was very gentle and rarely got angry, let alone risking his life. But the more gentle he was, the more terrifying he would be when he really risked his life. The Abbey Dean was the most powerful man in the human world when he was at his peak state. But even he couldn't do anything when facing the eldest brother who risked his life. The drunkard didn't want to stop him either. The drunkard turned sideways to avoid the stick. The eldest brother pointed at the giant peak and said, "Senior, aren't you worried that I'll leave like this?" The drunkard said calmly and confidently, "You're not as fast as me. I can catch up with you." The eldest brother said, "You've been chasing me for 3 months, but you still haven't caught up with me." The drunkard smiled and said, "As long as you don't enter the Xiankong temple, why should I catch up with you?" The eldest brother also smiled and said, "Senior, haven't you noticed that we've been standing opposite to each other? That's because I've been moving backward. If I turn around, can you still catch up with me?" The drunkard's expression suddenly changed. On the field by the cliff, the autumn wind suddenly whistled and a thunder-like sound was heard. A mass of airwaves spread to all directions and formed a huge hole. Hundreds of white cotton threads were falling in the wind. The eldest brother disappeared. The next moment, he appeared on the cliff plateau, under the pear tree. Almost at the same time, Jun Mo also came to the cliff plateau, covered in blood. Jun Mo looked at the eldest brother under the tree and nodded. The eldest brother and the junior brother hadn't seen each other for a long time. They didn't talk about the old days, but looked at the same place. On the broken temple in the cliff plateau, there was a white pagoda. In front of the white pagoda, an old monk sat cross-legged. In front of the old monk, there was a chessboard. Yesterday I said I would write 3 chapters today, but I really can't do it anymore. Just 1 chapter. If I'm in a better state of mind tomorrow, I'll try to make up for it. Sorry. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 962. A spider web fell from the eaves of the white pagoda and covered the old monk's head and body. The old monk closed his eyes and looked calm. His silver eyebrows fluttered in the wind and touched the spider web in front of him, as if they were 2 pieces of silk in the web. If one didn't look carefully, they couldn't be distinguished at all. Although the old monk closed his eyes, it gave people a feeling that his eyes were still on the world and were fixed on the seemingly ordinary chessboard in front of him. The old monk was naturally the chief monk of scripture of Xiankong Temple. Since Ning Ke and Sang Sang entered the chessboard, he had never left the chessboard. He watched the spring leaves, summer flowers, autumn fruits, and winter snow in the mountains and listened to the morning bells and evening drums in the temple. Regardless of the wind and rain, he remained silent. Jun Mo came to the cliff and looked at the eldest brother under the pear tree. He walked directly to the old monk and raised the iron sword in his hand to chop at the chessboard. The wide and straight iron sword chopped heavily on the chessboard, making a deafening noise. Dust splashed on the cliff plateau. When the dust settled, the chessboard was still lying quietly in front of the old monk's knees. There was no trace left on the chessboard, not even a tremble. With Jun Mo's powerful cultivation state, the iron sword could probably cut off a stone mountain. Unexpectedly, it couldn't shake the chessboard at all. The chessboard could withstand the power of the iron sword, but the cliff plateau couldn't. With a clear cracking sound, several cracks appeared on the cliff plateau. The cracks were dark and deep, probably hundreds of feet deep into the mountain. These cracks spread to the edge of the cliff and finally broke the cliff wall under the pear tree. Years ago, the splashing water on the chessboard turned into several large waterfalls. Although the water had no source, it kept flowing down the cliff. Until now, it was finally cut off by Jun Mo's sword. One sword could break the waterfall, but not the chessboard. Jun Mo looked at the chief monk behind the chessboard and raised the iron sword in his hand again. The chief monk still closed his eyes, as if he didn't know the existence of the iron sword. His hands fell on the chessboard. Was the Vajra of the chessboard his trick? Jun Mo couldn't be sure, and he didn't need to be sure. He raised the iron sword and chopped down again. But this time, it was not the chessboard, but the chief monk. Before the sword fell, the wind came first. The iron sword easily tore the seemingly troublesome cobwebs and fell on the chief monk's head, among the solemn precept scars. The iron sword was thick, and the chief monk's head was round. Therefore, Jun Mo didn't look like chopping with the sword, but more like hitting with a stick. Another loud crash sounded. The cold wind blew on the cliff plateau, and the pear tree swayed. The pear tree shook. The pear tree shook. The pear tree shook. The pear tree shook. The chief monk closed his eyes and still looked calm. But his silver eyebrows fluttered a little crazily, like a kasaya on a drying line in the wind. It was hard to guess where the sleeves and the hem of the clothes would flutter. The iron sword didn't leave any mark on his head, let alone a wound. He didn't bleed either. The chief monk's body had become Buddha, and his body and mind were both indestructible. To him, Ning Ke's primordial 13 arrows were like straws, and Jun Mo's iron sword was just a wooden stick. However, he suddenly became shorter. The reason why he became shorter was that his body had sunk into the surface of the cliff platform. He was still sitting cross-legged and had sunk only a few inches, but the iron sword had still sunk a little. Jun Mo still didn't speak. He raised the iron sword in his hand and prepared to chop down again. At this moment, the wind on the cliff became slightly turbulent. Eldest brother came to his side. This was what it meant to stand shoulder to shoulder. Junmo withdrew his iron sword because his eldest brother was holding a wooden stick in his hand. The eldest brother walked to the chief monk with the wooden stick in his hand and knocked on him. His movement was a bit slow, and the stick seemed to knock very lightly. However, when the wooden stick fell on the chief monk's head, a sound that was even more horrible than the sound made by Junmo's iron sword was heard. With a boom, countless cracks appeared on the white pagoda behind the chief monk, which looked like the previous spider web. The copper bell hanging on the eaves rang crisply and then exploded into pieces. The chief monk still had his eyes closed. His silver eyebrows fluttered in the wind, and his face became slightly pale. His body sunk half a foot deep into the cliff platform. Although he had sunk, the chief monk was not really hurt. The chessboard under his hands sunk deeper into the cliff platform and became more solid. The eldest brother sighed, "It still can't be broken." Junmo raised the iron sword and said, "Just keep smashing it." At this moment, a breeze rose on the cliff platform, and the fragrance of wine overflowed. The drunkard came to the platform and looked at the eldest brother in silence. Junmo looked back at him and said, "Do you want to stop us?" The drunkard said, "I don't want to risk my life." The academy's second-year students were present at the same time. Even he had to risk his life. However, the eldest brother felt a bit confused and asked, "Aren't you worried that we will take the chessboard away?" The drunkard said, "The chief monk is as strong as Vajra body. Even I and the butcher can't break it. Neither can you. So why should I worry?" Junmo didn't say anything more. He turned around and waved the iron sword to chop the chief monk's head again. There was another loud bang. The cracks on the white pagoda became deeper, and so did the cracks on the cliff platform. Many cracks also appeared on the stone walls in the cliff cave. The whole world seemed to be falling apart. But the chief monk was still the same. "Senior brother, it's your turn." Junmo stepped back and gave the position to the eldest brother. Looking at the chessboard that had sunk completely into the cliff platform, the eldest brother thought for a while and said, "I won't smash it." The drunkard smiled. Junmo frowned slightly. The eldest brother looked at him and said with a smile, "You try to pry it open." Junmo suddenly remembered something that happened many years ago in the back mountain of the academy. At that time, he and the eldest brother had just entered the academy and were still very young. They were ordered by the headmaster of academy to repair the mountain path in the back mountain. They encountered a rock that had fallen from the cliff, which was very troublesome. When Junmo was young, he was prouder, more confident and more stubborn than he was now. He held a mountain-splitting axe and kept smashing the big rock for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, his perlicue was bleeding, and his body was so exhausted that he could barely lift his mountain-splitting axe. However, only a small part of the rock had been smashed away. When he was smashing the rock, the eldest brother did nothing but watched. He knew that the eldest brother was a little weak, but he was still a little angry because of his helplessness. No matter how angry he was, Junmo wouldn't blame the eldest brother, let alone speak ill of him. So he felt very wronged. He didn't know why, but he just cried. The eldest brother looked at the huge rock for a long time. When he found that little Junmo was crying, he looked at him for a long time. Then he left without saying anything. The eldest brother left so heartlessly. Of course, Junmo wouldn't cry anymore. Who was he crying for? He washed his face with the cold stream water and recovered some energy. He picked up the axe again and was ready to continue smashing. At this time, the eldest brother came back with a dozen of tough big bamboo in his arms. His forehead was covered with sweat. It was very hard for him to drag these bamboos down. The eldest brother stuffed the bamboo into the gap between the rock and the cliff. He calculated and confirmed that it was accurate. Then he called Junmo to him and said, "Pry it." Jun Mo had always listened to the eldest brother. Although he didn't understand what the eldest brother wanted to do and what the bamboo was for, he still did as he was told. The huge rock was smashed by the mountain-splitting axe for 3 days and 3 nights without being smashed. Then when Jun Mo went to pry it, he found that the rock soon loosened and then rolled down the mountain path, becoming a scenery in the mountain stream. Many years had passed, but Jun Mo still listened to the eldest brother. Since the eldest brother asked him to pry it, he would do it. He walked to the front of the chief monk and stabbed the iron sword into it. The iron sword was not between the chief monk's body and the cliff plateau, but was stabbed into the edge of the chessboard. The drunkard's expression changed slightly. Jun Mo waved the iron sword to pry it out. The chi of heaven and earth on the cliff plateau was in chaos. The wind was howling. The stones on the surface of the white pagoda were peeled off and hit the chief monk's head, splashing smoke and dust. The chief monk was still standing there. The chessboard was still in the cliff plateau. The iron sword was bearing an unimaginable weight. It was like a real mountain. Jun Mo was going to pry the mountain up. A clear whistle burst out from his lips. It was as bright as a phoenix and as powerful as a landslide. The flagon on the drunkard's waist floated up slightly. The eldest brother stood in front of him with his back to him. In the clear whistle, the iron sword in Jun Mo's hand slightly bent and then straightened. His sword was always straight. Even a mountain couldn't bend it. There was an unimaginable power between the bending. The chessboard was finally pried up and slowly rose to the ground. The chief monk's silver eyebrows fluttered. He suddenly turned over his hands and pressed them on the chessboard. The mountain fell on the chessboard again. Jun Mo's clear whistle stopped abruptly. He shouted like thunder, "Up!" The cliff wall collapsed, the pear tree shook, and the green leaves fell like rain. The chessboard was up. The chief monk's hand was on the chessboard. He was still sitting cross-legged. The iron sword was strong and straight. However, the chessboard and the chief monk were as heavy as the Prajna mountain. Even if the chessboard was lifted, it could only make a small gap. The gap was thinner than a hair. Even the smallest ant couldn't climb in. But it was enough. The gap meant that the chessboard and the mountain had been separated. The chessboard and the mountain were separated, but not from the chief monk's hand. Then, it was the eldest brother's business. He didn't know when his hand had fallen on the shoulder of the chief monk. On the cliff plateau, the airflow burst out, making a buzzing sound like a bell or a chime. In front of the white pagoda, only Jun Mo was standing with the iron sword. The eldest brother, the chief monk, and the chessboard had all disappeared. Where did they go? They went to the sky. Although the giant mountain was majestic and tall and could be called the first peak in the world, it was deep underground. Therefore, if seen from the surface, the peak was only a little higher than the wilderness. The sky was much higher than the peak. There were white clouds floating in the blue sky. 2 people appeared in the white clouds. The eldest brother let go of his hand. The chief monk broke through the clouds and fell to the ground. The first update. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 963. On the cliff plateau, the drunkard looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. He had already been shocked when Yifutian had gotten rid of him in the wilderness. Now that he saw this scene, he was even more shocked. The realm that Yifutian had displayed had far surpassed the level he had displayed during the battle in Chang'an. It had even exceeded his imagination. Li Man, do you really want to be the fastest one? The flagon trembled in the autumn wind and the aroma spread. The drunkard's figure suddenly turned illusory and was about to break the space and go to the 9th heaven to help the chief monk. He didn't make a move just now because he believed that Li Man and Jun Mo couldn't do anything to the chief monk because of his Vajra body. But the fact overturned his speculation. Jun Mo used the iron sword to pry the chief monk and the chessboard off the cliff plateau. Li Man took the chief monk and the chessboard to the sky. Many people fell from the cliff, but few fell from the sky. A few years ago in Chang'an City, there were 3 people who fought from the ground to the sky and then fell from the sky. The final result was that Yu Lian, the most powerful person in the Devil's Doctrine, was also seriously injured. What about the chief monk? The chief monk was falling from the clouds to the ground with the chessboard in his arms. His body had become Buddha and was as solid as the earth. What would happen if he met the real earth? The drunkard was not as confident as before. He couldn't watch the chief monk get hurt. Most importantly, he couldn't watch the academy take the chessboard away. So he was ready to make a move. Right at this moment, an iron sword pierced through the air and slashed at his face. Jun Mo drew his sword. He knew that the drunkard was very powerful, so he used his right hand. The iron sword was rolled up by his right sleeve and chopped at the drunkard. Although his hand was not there, the sword and the intent were still there. The drunkard didn't know that Jun Mo had recovered so much after a year of fighting in the underground wilderness. He slightly raised his eyebrows and his palms appeared in front of him without any movement. His state was much higher than Jun Mo's, but he was cautious and used the immeasurable Buddhism. The wine was immeasurable, the longevity was immeasurable, the intent was immeasurable, and the power of Buddha was immeasurable. The drunkard's palms were like 2 mountains closing together and clamped Jun Mo's iron sword. Jun Mo's iron sword felt as if it was being crushed by a mountain. He couldn't move it, nor could he pull it out. In fact, he had never thought of withdrawing his sword. He knew that he was still far from the drunkard, but he did not care because he was not fighting alone today. The autumn wind blew on the plateau again. The cotton-padded jacket with dozens of thin white lines appeared under the pear tree. In a flash, eldest brother returned to the field from the high sky. Without hesitation, he raised the wooden stick in his hand and smashed it at the drunkard. He did not hit the drunkard's face or body. Although he had learned how to fight and the wooden stick was not an ordinary weapon, his style was not tough enough. As long as the drunkard was not absolutely tough, the unfathomable state of the drunkard would have enough time to use the correct method to deal with the wooden stick in his hand. So he smashed the iron sword with his wooden stick. The iron sword in Jun Mo's hand, the wooden stick fell on the iron sword without a sound. It was like forging iron. Jun Mo's iron sword was an iron hammer. When it was suppressed by the drunkard, it also pressed the drunkard, who was a hard iron block, down. Then the wooden stick became the second iron hammer and fell. There was a dead silence on the plateau, and then a loud noise suddenly burst out. The autumn wind blew. The drunkard's mouth was bleeding, his hair was disheveled, and his face was pale. His hands and body were trembling, and he could no longer suppress the iron sword. He let out a strange howl and turned around to leave. His voice was old and unpleasant, like rusty bronzes rubbing against each other. His howl was even more unpleasant to the ears. It sounded like a rusty bronze that had been smashed flat. It sounded so miserable. The autumn wind blew on the plateau again and the airflow dispersed. The drunkard disappeared without a trace. Jun Mo rolled up his right sleeve and the iron sword flew back to his left hand. Eldest brother did not chase after the drunkard. He reached out his hand and grabbed Jun Mo's empty sleeve. The two also disappeared on the plateau. The battle on the plateau was very dangerous. It was hard to describe it in words. But it happened in a very short time. From the drunkard's rising, to Jun Mo's sword attack, to the eldest brother's return and the drunkard's escape, it was only a moment. When the battle on the plateau happened, the chief monk was still falling from the sky. Countless layers of clouds were broken. The silver eyebrows of the chief monk were blown to the sky by the wind, shaking and swaying like a military flag in the strong wind. But he still closed his eyes and looked calm. The Buddha's chessboard was held in his arms. The light in the underground field was dim, and the meadow was blown down by the wind. The eldest brother and Jun Mo appeared. A shrill howl came from the sky, as if a heavy object was falling at a high speed. They did not look at the sky, but at the field in front of them. The air seemed to be torn apart, and the temperature in the field suddenly rose. The heavy object finally fell on the ground and smashed into the meadow. The earth kept shaking, and countless black soil was lifted up. There was a huge pit in the field. It was thousands of feet wide and dozens of feet deep. The rocks at the bottom of the pit were all shattered and covered in the pit. It looked like a miniature sinkhole. The chief monk sat cross-legged at the bottom of the pit. His kasaya had long been broken into pieces, and his naked thin body was covered with mud and stone chips. He looked very embarrassed, but he still did not open his eyes, and there was no blood on his body. The Buddha's chessboard was still in his arms. The eldest brother and Jun Mo were at the edge of the pit. Jun Mo jumped into the pit indifferently. He rolled up the sword in his right sleeve and chopped at the chief monk's head again. The chief monk lowered his head and did not dodge. The iron sword fell, followed by the wooden stick. The gravel at the bottom of the pit was shaken up and floated in the air. The chief monk's face became paler. The mud and stone chips on his head were shaken up by the iron sword and became brighter. But there was still no blood. The wind blew at the bottom of the pit, and the gravel hanging in the air fell down. The drunkard appeared behind the two. The eldest brother turned around and came to the front of the drunkard. The drunkard raised his eyebrows and slapped with his palm. A shadow suddenly appeared at the bottom of the pit, as if something was covering the sky. The eldest brother raised his stick to the sky and stabbed at the palm that covered the sky. The palm didn't fall, and the stick didn't break. The eldest brother turned pale and quickly retreated. He retreated to the side of the chief monk and put his hand on the chief monk's shoulder again. Jun Mo's iron sword had pierced between the chief monk and the gravel at the bottom of the pit. With a long howl, countless blood splashed out from Jun Mo's body and hit on the cliff at the bottom of the pit. The body of the chief monk, which was as heavy as a mountain, was forcibly lifted up again. It was still only a little bit, but it was enough. The eldest brother and the chief monk disappeared again. The next moment, they came to the sky above the east peak. There were countless rugged rocks on the east peak, which were made by the hard cultivation of countless eminent monks of the Xiankong temple. They were harder than steel, and sharper than swords. The eldest brother wanted to know if the chief monk would bleed if he was smashed on these rocks. But the drunkard had already arrived. He didn't care about Jun Mo's iron sword. He flew to the sky with the distanceless state on the ground at the risk of injury, and came to the front of the eldest brother. The drunkard firmly believed that as long as he was willing to pay the price, there was no reason for him to be slower than the eldest brother. He had cultivated for tens of thousands of years. How could he be slower than a person who had only cultivated for dozens of years? The distanceless state couldn't really fly freely in the sky. It could only let him go from the ground to somewhere in the sky, or back to the ground, and he could only stay in the sky for a short time. The eldest brother carried the heavy chief monk to the sky, which was already very hard, and was falling to the east peak. He should let go of the chief monk, but it was meaningless for him to let go with the drunkard by his side. What else could he do if he didn't let go? In the cold wind, the eldest brother looked at the drunkard and suddenly smiled. The smile was not decisive, but it was a decisive invitation. He took the chief monk and flew to the cliff at the edge of the giant pit. He didn't really fly. He wanted to take the chief monk to the depth of the cliff. The depth of the cliff was the underground of the wilderness. The distanceless state relied on the turbulent layer of the chi of heaven and earth to move at a high speed. It reduced the distance between two places to a very short distance. There were turbulent layers in the tangible things. But since ancient times, the grand cultivators who could reach the distanceless state would never try to go through those passages. Because it was very dangerous, and it meant that you might have to face countless cliffs in an instant. Those cliffs were not real cliffs, but the chi of heaven and earth between the cliffs. Would the drunkard dare to follow if the eldest brother did that? From the depth of the cliff at the east of the giant pit came a dull rumbling sound. On the field below the cliff, the farmers who were grazing, and the nobles who were planning how to suppress the rebellious serfs all heard the sound. Countless people walked out of their tents and looked at the cliff in the distance. Their eyes were full of confusion. The rumbling sound became louder and louder, getting closer and closer to the surface of the cliff. All of a sudden, countless stones shot out from somewhere on the cliff and fell into the field and the lake below. The water splashed, the mud flew, and the cattle and sheep screamed uneasily. As the smoke and dust settled, a deep cave appeared on the cliff. The hole was very deep and went straight into the cliff for miles. Jun Mo stood at the bottom of the pit in the field and looked at the hole on the cliff in the distance. He frowned slightly and was a little worried. The drunkard landed beside him and said while looking at him, "Li Man is dead." A cough came from the bottom of the pit. The eldest brother appeared beside Jun Mo and looked at the drunkard. "I'm lucky. I'm not dead." There were many cuts on his cotton-padded jacket, and blood was seeping out. The drunkard looked at him with a confused expression and said, "How could you not die in such a way?" The eldest brother said, "The chief monk is in front. He can cut mountains and cut stones." After saying that, he pulled up Jun Mo's empty sleeve and disappeared on the spot. The next moment, the drunkard appeared above the cliff. He lowered his head and looked at the deep hole. His face turned pale because the hole had been blocked by stones. The marks were made by the iron sword. At the end of the cliff cave, which was more than 10 miles deep, there was no light at all. It was as dark as the eternal night. The eldest brother and Jun Mo stood in front of the chief monk. The chief monk still lowered his head and said nothing. Jun Mo did not say anything either. He walked to the front of the chief monk and raised the iron sword, ready to chop down. The eldest brother suddenly said, "Pry again." Jun Mo did not ask because he understood. He directly stabbed the iron sword under the chief monk's body. The chief monk looked very miserable. He was covered with stone chips and there were some faint sounds coming from his body. He hit the ground continuously and fell more than 10 miles deep into the wilderness. Even though he was an invincible Vajra, it was still hard for him to hold on. But he did not open his eyes or say anything. His expression was still calm. Until then, he finally reacted. He still did not open his eyes, but his lips were slightly trembling as if he was about to say something. It was strange. It was not the first time that Jun Mo tried to pry him off the ground. He had been indifferent before. Why did he suddenly react? Jun Mo did not pay attention to him. He poured all his domineering state into the iron sword. The chief monk moved his lips and said with an old and hoarse voice, "As I have heard, he was vigilant because he had guessed what the two from the academy were going to do." What the eldest brother and Jun Mo were going to do was definitely not to throw him down in the air like before. At this moment, the drunkard could not enter the cliff cave for the time being. The eldest brother and Jun Mo had more time, so they could try another method. Making him leave the ground was the premise of this method. So he had to move. He moved his lips and said the Buddha's words. He used the supreme Dharma access of words to obey. But how could the eldest brother not know what he would do? When the 4 words of, "as I have heard," were just sounded in the dark cliff cave, another sentence followed. Confucius said, as Confucius said, it was the Buddha's words. The cliff cave was in silence. Jun Mo screamed. His body was covered with sweat and blood. He looked like a bloody man. His iron sword finally pried the chief monk off the ground once again. The eldest brother stretched out his hands and held the chief monk's shoulders, as if to ensure his balance. He did nothing. In fact, he had taken the chief monk far away in a flash. They walked in the cliff cave, within an inch. The eldest brother took the chief monk and went back and forth within an inch. Anyway, he did not want the chief monk to touch the ground. The eldest brother's cotton-padded jacket was bleeding again. Such intensive distanceless state had caused great damage to him. The chief monk was as solid as the earth. If he was separated from the ground, he would be weak. His face was slightly pale. Junmo's iron sword had fallen on the chief monk's head. There was a clear sound, like metal and stone colliding. A drop of red blood flowed out of the chief monk's head. The most powerful Vajra body of the Buddhism sect was finally broken by the eldest brother and Junmo. However, it was just a drop of blood. The eldest brother and Junmo had paid such a high price to make the chief monk bleed a drop of blood. If it was seen by others, it was not worth it, and they might even feel desperate. If they kept hacking like this, how many times would they need to hack the chief monk until he was seriously injured? How many years would they need to hack him? But people in the academy would never think so. Junmo held the iron sword and hacked the chief monk's head again and again, as if he would never feel tired. The eldest brother held the chief monk's shoulders and looked calm, as if he would never feel tired. So what if his body became Buddha? As long as he started to bleed, it meant that he would continue to bleed. No matter how many years it would take, as long as he kept hacking, he would be hacked to death. That was what Junmo thought. Eldest senior brother thought so too. And when the two of them wanted to do the same thing, there were very few times when that thing could not be done. We have 2 computers. My wife can enter the authors section, but I can't. It's a problem of my character. This is the 2nd chapter, 4,000 words. There are 2 more chapters. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 964. Many years ago, in the autumn rain at the Lang Temple, Yisu, the world wayfarer of Haotian Taoism, Qin Yan, the world wayfarer of Buddhism, and the most powerful sword in the human world could do nothing to them. They could only watch the Buddha statue collapse. Today, outside the Xiankong Temple in the West Wilderness, they could beat the chief monk of scripture, the Buddha in the human world, in front of the drunkard, such a powerful cultivator, and even broke the chief monk's Vajra body. Because they were very strong, and because they cooperated perfectly. Because they had a natural tacit understanding, which represented absolute trust and confidence. Only the academy could cultivate such temperament, and only the headmaster of academy could teach such disciples. When they fought side by side, even heaven would feel afraid, not to mention the enemy. After Junmo had chopped the iron sword for the umpteenth time, the chief monk of scripture finally opened his eyes. A thin stream of blood flowed from the top of his head into his eyes, and his sight was bloody. The chief monk felt very painful, really painful. He also found that the 2 disciples of the academy were really going to keep chopping forever. He didn't want to die yet, because he hadn't seen Buddha reappear in the human world. So he had to do something, although he knew the consequences. The iron sword fell again. The chief monk loosened his hand holding the chessboard, and put one hand in front of him. He raised it a little high, just in front of the iron sword. The chief monk's hand didn't hold the iron sword. Because the moment he let go, the eldest brother also let go of the iron sword. He held the wooden stick and smashed it heavily on the chief monk's mouth between his thumb and index finger. The wooden stick didn't want to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, but to feed the tiger with its own body. The chief monk suddenly felt suffocated. His hand, wrist, and chest trembled uneasily. His Vajra body made a cracking sound, as if it would break in the next moment. He had only wanted to stretch out one hand, because he could stop Junmo's iron sword with one hand. Unexpectedly, it was the wooden stick that came to him. He could not understand. Could the 2 from the academy see through the minds of humans? The eldest brother and Junmo couldn't see through others' thoughts, but they could know each other's thoughts without talking. So the iron sword didn't fall, but the wooden stick came. Junmo's iron sword fell down and chopped at the chessboard in the arms of the chief monk. No matter how chaotic the chief monk's Zen heart was, he couldn't stop the wooden stick. There was a clear ringing sound, as if a tiny porcelain cup had fallen to the ground. Suddenly, an extremely bright light appeared in the dark cave. It was the light of heaven. An extremely deep crack extended from the depths of the plains to the ground. Then, the earth shook, and the cliff collapsed. Countless rocks and dirt flew out. On the east side of the sinkhole, a gap of more than 10 miles long appeared. The scene was extremely shocking. In the opening of the sinkhole, there were innumerable ant nests, rat holes, roots of autumn grass, and stolen fruits. There was a thin stream of water between the rocks, gradually wetting the rocks. The chief monk sat among the rubble. His face was covered with dust and blood. He looked very miserable. The chessboard in his arms had already been taken away by Junmo's iron sword. The drunkard stood at the edge of the collapsed cliff and looked at the scene. His expression suddenly changed. Junmo had returned to the state before the verdant canyon, and Li Manman's state had improved rapidly. This made him extremely shocked and vigilant. However, he still didn't expect that these two could actually break the Vajra body of the chief monk and take away the chessboard. The chief monk looked at the eldest brother Junmo with a sad expression, but also a sense of loss and relief. His voice was as low as a bell, and he said with pity, "It's useless." "What's useless?" "Even if you get the chessboard, it's useless. You can't open the chessboard and save Haotian and Ning Ke from inside. Because it's a celestial instrument left by Buddha. If it didn't rot in the Lank Temple, it would never rot. It had already surpassed the rules of time and was truly Vajra body." The eldest brother glanced at the chessboard in Junmo's hand and said nothing. He reached out and grabbed Junmo's sleeve. The two disappeared and returned to the green tree by the cliff plateau. The next moment, the autumn wind blew again. The drunkard also returned to the cliff plateau with the chief monk of scripture. The chief monk sat in front of the white pagoda and looked at the two under the tree. He said with pity, "It's really useless." Junmo ignored him. He picked up the iron sword and chopped at the chessboard. The eldest brother stood in front of the chessboard with a pale face. It was obvious that his psyche power had been greatly consumed. But he just stood there. Neither the drunkard or the chief monk wanted to try. The sound of the iron sword falling on the chessboard kept ringing on the cliff plateau. It was clear and decisive, and it was completely different from the bell in the temple. There were countless soldiers and horses in the midst of it. Junmo waved the iron sword and kept chopping. No one knew how many times he had chopped and how much time had passed. The sound echoed among the cliffs, as if the army was vowing to attack the city. The Buddha city was hard to break. Junmo kept chopping until his fingers were bleeding. His expression didn't change. Every time he waved the sword, he was still so meticulous to make sure that he could exert the greatest power. The chief monk looked at the scene in silence and did nothing. So the drunkard did nothing either. He just watched quietly, and the more he watched, the more complicated his mood became. He should have known that there was no hope, but he still kept doing it. It even gave the onlookers the illusion that the iron sword could chop out hope from despair. What kind of mind did he have? How could the headmaster of the academy teach such a disciple? Where did he find such a disciple? Junmo suddenly stopped, not because he was tired, although he was really tired, but because one side of the iron sword had been deformed. The edgeless sword blade had become flat. The iron sword was indestructible. Before the verdant canyon, it had chopped countless swords. Even Lu Bai's sword had been broken by the iron sword. But today it was deformed in front of the chessboard. He looked at the chief monk of scripture and asked, "If it's really useless, why did you watch the chessboard on the cliff plateau for a whole year? You didn't dare to leave it no matter what happened." The chief monk said, "I watched it for a year because I wanted to watch it." The two "watch" in the beginning and the end of the sentence could have different pronunciations and meanings. The first "watch" was to guard, and the second "watch" was to see, or to watch. The eldest brother asked, "What do you want to watch?" The chief monk's silver eyebrows fluttered in the autumn wind. He said, "To watch Buddha and all living beings." Junmo didn't understand. He shook his head, changed the side of the iron sword in his hand, and continued to chop the chessboard. The chief monk's expression changed slightly, and the drunkard's expression became more and more serious. They didn't expect that Junimo stopped, not because he gave up, but because he wanted to change the side of the iron sword in his hand. So even if the iron sword was really broken, he would change another side and continue to chop. The eldest brother suddenly said, "Buddha's chessboard can't be cut, and Haotian can't be killed." The drunkard looked at him and wanted to stop him from continuing. But he thought for a while and didn't move. The eldest brother continued, "Even if Buddha destroyed her existence in the chessboard, he could only turn her back into a pure rule and naturally return to the divine kingdom. What's the point of doing that?" The chief monk put his palms together and said, "Buddha could foresee the past 5,000 years, and the future 5,000 years. He could foresee the past when he was alive, and the future when he was dead. Naturally, he could foresee what happened today." The eldest brother said calmly, "The headmaster thought for 1,000 years and finally came up with a way to keep her in the human world. Could Buddha foresee the headmaster's means? Could Buddha foresee the youngest brother's ability? Or could Buddha foresee that Haotian was divided into two by the academy? No, Buddha couldn't foresee anything." His tone was normal, and his expression was calm, but he was confident. Even Haotian couldn't foresee what the academy did, let alone Buddha. The chief monk understood, so he kept silent for a long time. The drunkard had heard the Abbey Dean talk about it in the stone room of the divine halls of West Hill. So he knew it long ago, and that was why he came here to help the Buddhism sect. Buddha set a game of life and death for Haotian, but he couldn't foresee that Haotian had become two. In the eldest brother's words, what was the point of the game? Pointless. In a very short time, the chief monk became much older, because he knew the intention of Taoism, and admitted that the academy was right, and Buddha's game was pointless. If there was only one Haotian, then Buddha's chessboard could only kill Sang Sang, and then suppress her forever, so that she couldn't return to the divine kingdom and be resurrected. But now there were two Haotian. Even if Buddha could kill Sang Sang, how could he prevent the rules she turned into after her death from connecting with the world? Haotian was still there, and rules were naturally connected, and nothing could stop it. After death, Sang Sang would definitely return to the divine kingdom, which was the ending the Abbey Dean wanted. Pointless. The chief monk looked at Junimo, who was still cutting the chessboard, and repeated the 4 words again. "What you are doing is also pointless. This is Buddha's chessboard. As long as Buddha doesn't allow them to return, they will never be able to. As for whether Haotian in the chessboard is alive or dead, and whether she will return to the divine kingdom after her death, it depends on the fate of Buddha, or the will of heaven. Before that, mortals like us are pointless." The bell between the peaks was still ringing. Many monks came to the cliff plateau, but they didn't dare to go forward. Hearing this, they all bowed with their palms pressed together. Qi Mian and the 3rd elder of Commandment Yard also came. In this battle between the academy and Xiankong Temple, it seemed that the academy had the upper hand. But as long as the academy couldn't open the chessboard, it was destined to lose. Junimo finally stopped and suddenly said, "If we can't open it, then we will go in." The eldest brother smiled and said, "That makes sense." The chief monk said, "Not everyone can enter it." The eldest brother said, "Chief monk, have you ever wondered why we didn't leave, but came to the cliff plateau, since we have the chessboard?" The chief monk's silver eyebrows slightly fluttered, as if he had noticed something. The eldest brother looked at the green tree and reached out to touch the leaves. He said, "Is this the pear tree?" The chief monk was silent. Qi Mian and the other monks behind the green vine slightly changed their expressions. The eldest brother said, "I heard that this pear tree blooms every 500 years, bears fruit every 5 days, and falls to the ground every 5 minutes. It touches the ground and drifts with the current, never to be seen again. It's really amazing." The drunkard said, "This tree blooms and bears fruit a year ago." The eldest brother sat down against the green tree and said, "If so, then I will wait for another 499 years. When it blooms and bears fruit, I will go into the chessboard to find it. Jun Mo picked up the chessboard and sat down under the tree. Chapter 3, and then go to have a meal. Chapter 4 will be later. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 965. Even if he had to wait for another 500 years, he would continue to wait. Listening to the morning bell and evening drum, watching the spring breeze and autumn rain, silently waiting for time to pass. There would definitely be a time when the pear blossom tree would bloom like snow. What kind of perseverance was this? What kind of spirit was this? Looking at the two under the pear tree, the chief monk remained silent for a long time. He did not expect that the academy would even know the biggest secret of the Buddhism sect. That seemingly ordinary scholar was indeed as the rumors said. He was well-read and knowledgeable. No matter what field he was in, he could be the best. The drunkard walked to the other side of the cliff, untied the flagon, and began to drink. He looked at the distant sky silently. What he needed to do was to help Haotian Taoism send Haotian back to the divine kingdom. It would take at least 500 years for the chessboard to open, but he was not worried at all. What he was best at was fighting against time. The chief monk said, 500 years is a long time, enough for a lot of things to happen in the human world. Taoism won't miss this opportunity if you wait under the pear tree. But what about the academy? What about the Tang Empire? No wonder he was the chief preaching monk of the Xiankong Temple and the Buddha on earth of this generation. His simple words made everyone silent. Eldest brother and Jun Mo would wait under the pear tree for 500 years. Who would guard Chang'an? This green tree was planted by Buddha himself countless years ago. It was a slender sapling back then, but now it's difficult to encircle it with 2 palms. When you come again 500 years later, perhaps the green tree will have reached the sky. What the chief monk said was rather sentimental, but it was also a suggestion. Jun Mo said, if the pear tree is not in front of us, the academy will not be at ease. The chief monk said, this pear tree is a sacred object left by Buddha. We must take good care of it. Jun Mo said, youngest brother is in the chessboard, so the academy has to be careful. Moreover, you bald donkeys are the most shameless, fickle, hypocritical, and fanatical. I'm afraid that you will destroy the tree as soon as we leave. The Xiankong Temple monks behind the green vines had ugly expressions when they heard this. The chief monk said calmly, what is the academy going to do? There are more than 10,000 monks in the temple, all of them have firms and hearts. If they really want to seize it, do you think you can defend it for 500 years? Jun Mo ignored him and looked at eldest senior brother, asking, senior brother, is it possible? Eldest brother thought about it and said, that's feasible. Jun Mo didn't say anything specific, but he knew what Jun Mo was asking. So he slowly stood up, holding the wooden stick, and stood in front of the pear tree. Jun Mo stood up and adjusted his qi circulation for a moment. Then, he stabbed the iron sword into the cliff plateau until the hilt slid down. The cliff was firm, and the iron sword went in silently. The drunkard had guessed what the two from the academy were going to do. He raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Eldest senior brother was very gentle and kind. He to him to say. To senior eldest, Zhou, and years later, he said, he, too. Eldest senior brother's temperament was very gentle and kind. He did everything slowly and spoke softly. He was the most amiable person and rarely got angry. He had never threatened anyone before, so his threats were very powerful. It was just like how he rarely risked his life against others, so when he risked his life, everyone would be afraid. The drunkard frowned. What he wanted was true immortality. But it was not worth it to drive the academy mad and kill him at all costs just for immortality. Before today, he did not believe that the academy could kill him. But now he realized that it was not entirely impossible. Of course, even if the academy could kill him, they would have to bury the academy with them, or even the entire Tang Empire. Logically speaking, such a situation should not happen. But what if the academy really went crazy? What if these people really wanted to kill him? The drunkard said, Taoism invited me to the West Wilderness and asked me to pass on a message. I brought it here a year ago. I also tried to leave the chessboard in the Xiankong Temple. Since I failed, I will not do it again. Eldest senior brother said, Thank you very much. He knew that the drunkard said so because he had confirmed that the chessboard left by Buddha could not be opened by external force. But he did not want to say it out. The drunkard could guess what the academy wanted to do because he knew the headmaster of the academy and Kuhauren. He knew that the academy looked elegant and peaceful, but it was actually a group of lunatics. The monks of the Xiankong Temple did not know the academy well, so they could not guess what the academy was going to do. They looked at the eldest senior brother who was standing in front of the pear tree and became nervous. The chief monk looked at Jun Mo and the sword in his hand. His expression suddenly changed. Jun Mo did not look at him. He held the sword hilt and shouted. The iron sword began to move on the cliff plateau. The movement of the iron sword was to cut. A horrible sound of friction was heard. Pebbles flew and dust rose. The iron sword moved around the pear tree and on the surface of the cliff plateau. Finally, it broke out of the cliff. A crack appeared on the ground of the cliff plateau. The eldest senior brother bent down and put his hand into the crack. Jun Mo asked again, Senior brother, is it possible? The eldest senior brother said, It's a bit hard, but it's doable. What about you? I can't leave yet. Jun Mo held the iron sword and looked at the dark and cold underground field under the peak. He said, There are many people who need me there. The eldest senior brother praised, Younger brother, you are kind and brave. Jun Mo said, I just want peace of mind. Eldest brother said, Kindness is the only thing that can make one feel at ease. Courage is the only thing that can move forward. Being praised by the eldest senior brother, Jun Mo was still calm because he believed that he was worthy of the two words. He said, I will send you off. The eldest senior brother said, I will send you off. After saying this, his hand shook slightly. The crack on the cliff plateau suddenly widened. The sound of friction was loud. A large cliff plateau slowly left the mountain. The pear tree was on the cliff plateau. The mud and sand fell. Under the cliff plateau, the roots of the pear tree could be vaguely seen. This giant peak was the body of the Buddha. The cliff was so strong. Jun Mo's iron sword had cut a piece of the cliff. And now, the eldest senior brother was going to leave with this cliff plateau. Seeing this, the monks of the Xiankong Temple were shocked and speechless. They forgot what they were supposed to do. The eldest senior brother put the wooden stick into his waist and grabbed Jun Mo's sleeve. Then they disappeared. A piece of the cliff plateau was also missing. The gap of the cliff was extremely smooth. The green pear tree was also gone. The eldest senior brother and Jun Mo left just like that. They took away the chessboard left by the Buddha, the pear tree left by the Buddha, and even a piece of flesh from the Buddha's palm. The chief monk was silent with a pale face. The drunkard took a sip of wine and sighed, Lunatics. From the old to the young, they are all lunatics. The eldest senior brother sent Jun Mo back to the underground field and then returned to the academy. From this day on, there was a pear tree in the back mountain of the academy. There was a chessboard under the pear tree. Many people were watching the chessboard. They were so engrossed in it that they even forgot the passage of time. They didn't want to see the Buddha or the living beings in the chessboard. They just wanted to see how to open the chessboard and save the youngest brother from it. If I can study at the back of the mountain of the academy, I think it will be a very happy thing. It's really cool. 4 chapters have been completed. Today's update will definitely be very late, so I want to report to everyone in advance. I won't release separate chapters. First, I'm tired. Second, I have something to do in the afternoon and evening. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 966. The back mountain of the academy, especially near the Mirror Lake, was always like spring all year round. Moreover, the pear tree was unusual, so it didn't feel bleak at all. It was full of green leaves, casting a shade. They sat in the shade and stared at the chessboard for a long time. They still couldn't figure out what was so special about the chessboard, nor could they figure out a way to open it. Muyu used an embroidery needle to tidy up her hair and said angrily, "You still haven't figured out a way?" Fourth brother looked at the chessboard and said seriously, "I've thought of 73 ways. But since eldest brother and second brother can't open it, those methods won't work." Muyu said, "We have to try." They left the pear tree and came to the water drawing room by the stream. They saw fourth brother put the chessboard on the stove and let it be burned by the blue flame. Their expressions changed slightly. Beigong Weiyang held the zither and asked worriedly, "Even if the Buddha's chessboard won't be burned, will youngest brother be roasted in it?" Shiman Buhua pointed at the chessboard on the stove with his bamboo flute and said, "It's been burning for a long time, but it's still not black. This chessboard is not a barbecue plate, and youngest brother is not pork." Fourth brother didn't pay attention to them. After confirming that the chessboard had been burned to a very high temperature, he picked it up with iron tongs and threw it into the cold stream behind the blacksmith's room. There was a sizzling sound, and white mist appeared in the stream. The big white goose, who was squatting on the top of the water wheel and looking into the distance, was startled. It flapped its wings and flew to the stream. It was very dissatisfied with these people. Heat expansion and cold contraction was the best way to destroy a hard object. However, to the disappointment of the academy, the chessboard didn't change at all. Not even a crack appeared on it. In the following days, the people of the academy did many things to the chessboard. Muyu threw the chessboard into the tactical array of the Cloud Gate, trying to tear it apart, but to no avail. Wang Qi boiled a pot of the most poisonous and corrosive soup in the world, threw the chessboard into it, and cooked it for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, most of the fish in the stream died, and the big white goose was so angry that it was sad, but the chessboard did not move. Fourth brother took out the small iron pot left by Ning Kei in the back mountain and tried to blow up the chessboard, but only killed half of the fish in the Mirror Lake. The big white goose was so sad that he did not want to live, but the chessboard was still there. One day, fifth senior brother Song Qian suddenly said, speaking of the chessboard, "I always feel that since it's used to play chess, it must be related to chess." He and his eighth brother were the best chess players in the world. When it came to playing chess, or the chessboard, there was no one more familiar with it than them. Everyone's eyes lit up and they looked at him with hope. Muyu asked, "Then?" Song Qian touched his head and said, "Then, there's no then." Hearing this, everyone was angry. They thought that since he could not reason with them, why did he suddenly speak? Wang Qi was dealing with the pot of poisonous medicine, so he did not fully understand the situation. He took out 2 boxes of chess pieces from his yard and asked, "Then, where should we play the chess pieces?" They wanted to teach Wang Qi a lesson, but thinking that their youngest brother was in the chessboard, Chen Pipi was in Linkong, and 11 was the youngest in the academy, they held back their anger. Fourth senior brother thought for a moment, then took the chess box from his hand, and then poured all the chess pieces in the box onto the chessboard, only to hear the crisp sound of the chess pieces echoing continuously. The chessboard was full of black and white chess pieces. Everyone surrounded the chessboard and looked at it nervously. They even forgot to breathe. However, nothing happened. From the chessboard and the pear tree back to the back of the mountain of the academy, sixth brother had not said a word. Until now, when everyone looked dejected and desperate, he stood up with a big iron hammer in his hand. He looked at them and said honestly, "We still have to smash it in the end." He looked at them and said honestly, "Let me do it." Muyu said, "Senior brothers didn't smash it in Xiankong Temple." Sixth brother said, "We have more time. We can keep smashing it." Fourth brother thought for a while and sighed, "It seems that we have no other choice." The quiet back of the mountain of the academy became noisy from that day on. There was a dull sound by the mirror lake. Sixth brother kept smashing the chessboard with the iron hammer. Although he was strong and had swung the iron hammer countless times in his life, he would eventually get tired. When he was tired, fourth brother and fifth brother would step up to replace him. Those who were obsessed with chess left their chessboards. Those who were obsessed with sand tables also left the sand tables. Those who were obsessed with arrays also left the arrays. They became hard-working blacksmiths beside Buddha's chessboard. Those who were obsessed with music didn't change. Beigong Weiyang and Shiman Buhua were too thin and weak. They tried twice but couldn't even lift the iron hammer. So they were driven aside. Looking at the scene of their fellow disciples working hard, the two of them couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. So, they sat on the side and played an impassioned song to cheer for everyone and the guy in the chessboard. Bang! 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 The iron hammer kept falling on the chessboard. The ground of the cliff plateau at the back of the mountain was shaking. The fish that survived a few days ago hid in the water grass in fear. The big white goose stared at the chessboard curiously, wondering if the silly guy was in it. The little white wolf howled at the bright moon in the night sky in the depths of the forest. It wanted to learn the majestic manner of its father, but it was disturbed by the hammering sound coming from the foot of the mountain. Only the old yellow bull was calm. He sat on the meadow and ate the grass from time to time. Countless hammers fell on the chessboard, but the chessboard didn't calm down. Mu Yu's dinner was a little late. The brothers who were blacksmiths were hungry and dissatisfied. Some of them began to miss the girl who used to cook for them. "She is Haotian. Of course she can cook better than me. You want to eat? Then get her out of the chessboard." Mu Yu was very angry. She squatted down and looked at the chessboard. She said earnestly, "Little brother, when can you come out? Remember to bring your wife with you." In front of a famous Taoist temple in Lincoln, Chen Pipi was teaching thousands of followers in the square. He looked calm and his words were clear and definite. The autumn wind blew his Taoist robe and made it flutter. The chubby lad in the past did look like a messenger of Haotian Taoism. Yi Su had left the South Jin Kingdom, but the new stream that he founded in a shabby alley did not decline. Instead, it was flourishing at an unimaginable speed. Because Chen Pipi was working hard to continue his cause, and with the help of the sword Garrett, no one in the South Jin Kingdom dared to stop the preaching of the new stream. As for those stubborn Taoists and divine priests who were loyal to the divine halls of West Hill, they had already become corpses in the great swamp in the dark of night. The grand preaching and teaching was a reflection of the popularity of the new stream in the South Jin Kingdom. Among the thousands of believers, there were old and young, poor and rich people. Today, Chen Pipi was teaching the third volume of the West Hill Scriptures, which was originally abstruse and difficult to understand, and could only be explained and defined by the divine priests. But with his calm voice, it became the simplest and clearest words. The original meaning of the scriptures was not lost, but the interpretation was completely different from that of the divine halls of West Hill. After the preaching, thousands of believers bowed to Chen Pipi in front of the Taoist temple and then left. According to the requirements of the new stream, if they wanted to show their devotion to Haotian and the new stream, the first thing they had to do was to be kind to others and themselves, and live a good life. It was a simple requirement, so it was really easy for the preaching of the new stream. It seemed that it was the same for any religion at the beginning. Under the protection of several disciples of the sword Garrett and the army of the South Jin Kingdom, Chen Pipi left the Taoist temple and walked to the alley where he lived. Along the way, the believers he met all respectfully gave way to him. When he returned to the shabby room in the alley, he looked at the disciple of the blind sword Garrett who was standing by the window. He took off his Taoist robe and complained, "It's so annoying to have so many people follow me every time. Lu Yiqing turned around. The sunlight seeped in from the window and illuminated the white cloth covering his eyes. He smiled and said, I heard that since you sent people to follow you, you have gained more respect. I don't know if it's respect or fear. Chin Pipi wiped the sweat off his body with a wet towel. His white fat was trembling, and he looked nothing like the celestial being he was in front of the Taoist temple. Lu Yiqing said, respect, to a large extent, comes from fear, such as the attitude toward the divine halls. After a moment of silence, Chin Pipi threw the wet towel into the basin and said, I know what you want to say. If the divine halls really want to kill me, you can't do anything about it. Any powerful organization was most afraid of internal division or internal challengers. Yisu's new stream was undoubtedly the one that the divine halls of West Hill were most wary of. The South Jin Kingdom was under great pressure from the divine halls of West Hill to hand Chin Pipi over. Lu Bai's death naturally made the Sword Garret and the divine halls of West Hill irreconcilable enemies. Of course, the South Jin Kingdom would not hand Chin Pipi over. The problem was that the divine halls of West Hill could send people to Lingang at any time to kill Chin Pipi. Chin Pipi's ocean of qi and mountain of snow had been sealed, and he was no longer the cultivation genius he used to be. That was why the Sword Garret was so nervous and sent so many people to protect him. As far as I know, the divine halls secretly sent a red-robed divine priest to Lingang. He has already met the one in the imperial palace. I'm worried that the royal family of the South Jin Kingdom will change their attitude, said Lu Yiqing. Chin Pipi looked at him and said with a smile, you have already killed an emperor. What's the harm in killing another one? Lu Yiqing said bitterly, I can't kill everyone from the South Jin Kingdom. After a moment of silence, Chin Pipi said, or, we can leave. Lu Yiqing said, what I want to ask is, when is the academy going to do it? Chin Pipi walked to him and looked at the sunset outside the window. He said, I think it should be soon. Lu Yiqing said, then I think the divine halls will do it soon. Chin Pipi said, yes, my father will definitely not miss this opportunity. Let's keep watching. We won't be disappointed in the end. There will be a surprise. I can't wait. This is the first chapter of today. I will continue to write. I'm really tired. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 967. Lu Yiqing asked and the academy would act, and he meant Qinghe Prefecture. As long as Qinghe Prefecture was conquered, the South Jin Kingdom would be united with the Tang Empire. It would be difficult for the West Hill Divine Palace to do anything. The West Hill Divine Palace's target was naturally the South Jin Kingdom. The South Jin Kingdom was powerful. Taoism would never give up the South Jin Kingdom if they wanted to defeat the Tang Empire. Moreover, the South Jin Kingdom had always been under the Divine Hall's control. Lu Yiqing was about to say something, but Tang Xiaotang came back from shopping. It was not appropriate for him to say more. He bowed to them and left with the disciples of the Sword Garret. Chin Pipi looked at the disciples of the Sword Garret disappearing in the dusk. He was silent for a long time. He knew that the South Jin Kingdom was under great pressure from the West Hill Divine Palace, especially recently. It was a secret to ordinary people that they were trapped in the chessboard by Buddha. But it was not a secret to him, who could keep in touch with the academy. Because of this sudden change, the academy had to adjust their original plan. Taoism, especially his father, would never miss such an opportunity. I've been cultivating Taoism since I was a child, and I've never had any obstacles. People in the abbey praised me as a rare genius in Taoism. Later, I got 6A+ grades in the academy and was directly summoned to the second floor by my teacher. I became a member of the back mountain of the academy and entered the knowing destiny state without knowing it. Cultivation is never difficult for me. Chin Pipi stood in front of the window and looked in the direction of Chang'an. He continued, maybe because of this, or because I don't want to compete with my senior brother for Taoism. I don't pay much attention to cultivation and am not interested in power. But now, I have become a useless person and can no longer cultivate. I can no longer have the same or even stronger power as before. But I suddenly want power. He wanted to do something for the academy. That was why he wanted power. Tang Xiaotang walked to him and held his hand. She said, "Don't worry too much." "I can't not worry." Chen Pipi's two most respected senior brothers, Jun Mo and Yi Su, were both doing the most difficult things. He felt anxious every time he thought of this. Tang Xiaotang said, "Fourth uncle sent a letter saying that the academy is trying to open the chessboard, but has not been able to do so. Why don't you worry about it?" Chen Pipi said, "Buddha's chessboard cannot trap Ning Quebec." Tang Xiaotang was confused and asked, "Why?" Chen Pipi said, "Because he's with Haotian." Tang Xiaotang said, "But, doesn't Buddha want to destroy Haotian?" Chen Pipi said, "Even if Buddha can really predict what will happen to Haotian after his death, he can't predict Ning Quebec. He is a variable." Tang Xiaotang trusted him very much. Since he said she didn't need to worry, she really didn't. Her expression became bright and cheerful as she said, "To celebrate, let's eat an extra bowl of rice tonight?" Chen Pipi sighed and said, "No, I still have no appetite." "What are you still worried about?" Tang Xiaotang was a little perplexed. "Since this matter is related to Haotian Taoism, it must be arranged by my father. No matter whether the Buddhist chessboard can trap Haotian and Ning Ke, I'm afraid Haotian will eventually return to the Divine Kingdom." Chen Pipi said, "At that time, the war in the human world will start again. Can the academy still hold on? Every time I think about this, I feel like I'm chewing wax. How can I have any appetite? I can only eat 5 bowls tonight." In a city in the kingdom of Song, Yi Su was standing in the old yard of a shabby Taoist temple. He was explaining some chapters of the West Hill scriptures to a dozen new followers. After leaving Lincoln, he traveled around the world, hoping to spread the doctrine of the new stream more widely and awaken more poor believers. In the end, he came to the kingdom of Song, the most powerful Taoism force and the most devout belief in Haotian, to preach. His light-colored robe fluttered in the damp breeze from the sea. The stains on it were obvious and gave off a faint stench. It must have been smashed by rotten eggs. Preaching in the kingdom of Song was much more difficult than in Lincoln. He had been mentally prepared when he chose this place. But he didn't expect the hostility of the people to be so direct. Several broken bricks flew over from the other side of the wall and fell to the ground, making a muffled sound and then breaking into pieces. The dozen followers were frightened and panicked. Then, the wooden door of the small Taoist temple was savagely smashed open, and dozens of people rushed in with sticks in their hands, cursing and swearing. 2 children were mixed in with the adults, watching this scene with excitement. They held bricks in their hands, eager to try. It seemed that they were the ones who threw the broken bricks earlier. Rotten eggs and chopsticks flew everywhere in the courtyard of the Taoist temple. Not long after, Yi Su's body was in a mess. Vegetable leaves hung on his body, and his hair was full of stinky egg juice. The 10 or so followers were beaten badly. Their heads were bleeding, and they begged bitterly to be let out of the Taoist temple. Yi Su was the only one left in the Taoist temple. He looked at the angry people. There was no resentment or disappointment in his eyes, nor was there any pity common to Buddhism monks. He looked calm and even smiled. His reaction made the people even angrier. Some of the men raised sticks and smashed at him. There were many people outside the small Taoist temple. Hearing the noise inside the wall, those who had nowhere to vent their anger couldn't bear it anymore. They squeezed in through the door. The Taoist temple was really small. It could only accommodate dozens of people at most. But in a moment, hundreds of people squeezed in. The scene became very chaotic. Many people were pushed to the ground, unable to stand up. People were trampled everywhere. Sounds of bones breaking and screams could be heard from time to time. Yisu was beaten to the point that he was covered in blood. But he still stood where he was without dodging. Finally, he bent down and squatted on the ground. The men at the front didn't care about the crowd or the screams. They separated the crowd with brute force and continued to hit Yisu with sticks. Dull sounds and sounds of bones breaking could be heard one after another. After a long time, the crowd finally calmed down. Then they realized the scene was so chaotic. Many people were seriously injured. They hurriedly helped the injured out to seek medical treatment. Suddenly, a miserable voice came from outside the Taoist temple. "My child. My child. Where are my children? Have any of you seen my 2 children?" A woman in simple clothes cried as she rushed into the Taoist temple. She searched the injured people on the ground. The people who came to cause trouble today were all neighbors. They all knew each other. They hurriedly went to help. The ground was covered in blood. She couldn't find them. The woman's face was pale. She cried so hard that she couldn't catch her breath. She sat on the ground and couldn't get up again. The people in the Taoist temple looked at each other. They thought that in the chaos earlier, even those strong men were seriously injured. Could it be that the 2 children were trampled to death? That was what they thought, but no one dared to say it in front of the woman. For a moment, the scene became extremely quiet. Some people thought angrily, if it wasn't for that person, why would everyone come to the Taoist temple? It's all your fault. You're the main culprit. An old man walked in front of Yisu. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He raised the walking stick in his hand and smashed it at him. There was a muffled sound. Yisu spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground. The old man hadn't vented his anger. He was ready to hit him again. Some young men also picked up sticks and followed. They thought that they must beat this blasphemous Taoist to death today. However, the next moment, everyone stopped what they were doing. The walking sticks and sticks in their hands could no longer smash down. They saw a scene. Yisu let go of his hands and sat on the ground weakly. There were 2 children in his arms. The 2 children's faces were pale. They didn't know what had happened. They looked at the neighbors and uncles surrounding them with sticks. When they looked again, they realized that they were so close to Yisu. They couldn't help but scream in fear. They subconsciously picked up the brick in their hands and smashed it at him. Yisu's face was bleeding profusely. Even though he had been hit by the brick, it was only one more wound. He looked at the 2 children and asked with a smile, "Are you okay?" The children didn't know how to answer. No one in the Taoist temple knew how to answer. It was quiet. The old man looked a little confused. The walking stick in his hand slowly fell. Who was this person? After a moment, he came to his senses. He reached out and patted the 2 children's heads. He scolded, "Silly things. You can hit anyone?" The woman rushed over and held the 2 children in her arms. She thanked Yisu repeatedly. The old man looked at the young men behind him and scolded, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and call the doctor." The men were a little flustered. They asked, "Sir, the doctor is outside." The old man shouted, "Please come in. Let this gentleman have a look." This was Yisu's current life. What he was doing was actually very similar to what Jun and Mo had done in the underground field. They both wanted the people to know more things. For example, what was in the field above the cliff. For example, what wasn't in the West Hill Divine Palace. For example, what they could do and what they didn't need to do. Faith was the last hope of the unfortunate. But faith couldn't be the root of misfortune or the reason to explain misfortune. True faith should let people have the courage to change their misfortune. So first of all, people should learn to believe in themselves. Yisu and Jun Amo used to be both proud and brilliant. They went their separate ways in front of the verdant canyon. But they finally walked the same path. This path was worth applauding. But it was certainly not a good thing for the Buddhism sect and Hautian Taoism. If human beings all chose to believe in themselves, then the power of Buddha and Hautian would naturally become weak. There was a wheelchair in front of the stone house on the cliff plateau of the West Hill Divine Palace. The Abbey Dean sat in the wheelchair. He seemed to be afraid of the cold wind on the cliff. He wrapped the blanket around himself with difficulty and said, "When Hautian returns to the Divine Kingdom, I will go and kill them. I need to eat something." The next chapter will be later. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.